The attack that heaven and earth had launched was unavoidable. The rulers were the entire world, so they could easily fill it with their power. Nothing inside the sky was safe from their offensive. Noah knew that far too well. He had been aware of that issue for way too long, but seeing it with his own eyes gave birth to unexpected emotions. He could feel his instincts screaming in fear and his very mind begging him to hide. Still, that was only an instinctive reaction caused by highly heightened senses. The aware side of Noah's mind knew that running away wasn't exactly possible when the entire world had stepped into the battlefield. Moreover, Noah had reached the solid stage. That was his peak, the utter apex of the cultivation journey. He couldn't get stronger than that, so he only had one path left to tread. He could only go forward. The attack fell faster than Noah had expected, but that surprise didn't delay his actions. His consciousness couldn't expand under that heavy assault, but he still unleashed his sharpness. Countless slashes materialized on Noah's body and shot forward to express his destructive sharpness. Snore appeared in the open and ignored the damage it instantly suffered to spread its wings and unleash its violent attack. The parasite expanded wildly, uncaring of the branches that crumbled as soon as they touched the light. The creature had only one purpose in life, and it went all out in an attempt to accomplish it. Black lines filled the gaps among the array of slashes and added sharpness to the already full area. Duanlong also absorbed what it could, and the dark matter helped where possible. Noah's offensive failed to push back the entirety of the light, but it dug multiple channels into that seamless attack. Blackness expanded through the white array that had filled the world, and everything eventually dispersed. Clarity returned to Noah's senses and allowed him to inspect the area. He had failed to hit heaven and earth with his last explosion of power. Most of his attacks had fallen on the sky, but he had still managed to lower the overall destructive properties of the white offensive. Nevertheless, some of that partially solid light had fallen on Noah. The crystal energy wasn't only extremely unstable and violent. It was also the result of two types of incredible fuels, so its power was a certainty. Noah found his body riddled with injuries. They weren't deep, but they released a smelly smoke that hinted at heaven and earth's destructive properties. Their energy carried something quite toxic for the beings belonging to a single path, but that quality made it easy to counter. A short burst of dark matter came out of Noah's injuries and removed all the tiny crystals trying to invade his insides. Potential then filled the ethereal blackness, which quickly sent it toward different aspects. Noah healed quickly, and the same went for his companions. Snore, Night, the swords, Duanlong, and Shafu regained full structural stability and became ready for the next exchange. I can do this, Noah thought as a cold smile appeared on his face. S? The time had finally come, and Noah couldn't help but be ecstatic. He finally had the chance to face the entire world. He didn't have to hold anything back, but the battle still carried issues. Fending off the world was bound to fill Noah with potential, but that wasn't a winning strategy. He needed to defeat heaven and earth, but they weren't easy targets. Destroying the crystal figure could be a good start, but the sky would remain around him even after that achievement. Why am I even bothering with this? Noah partially mocked himself inside his mind. Destroy the crystals. Destroy everything they throw at me. Destroy the sky. Noah prepared himself to execute that plan, but a familiar suddenly landed at his side before clearing his throat. Noah felt forced to lower his swords, but he still shrugged his shoulders when he turned toward his friend. Did you have enough fun, my heir? Divine Demon asked while swirling his cup of wine. What are you getting at? Noah asked. You aren't the only one with a beef against heaven and earth, Divine Demon stated. Isn't fighting them on my own the behavior of a true demon? Noah teased. Look for yourself, Divine Demon laughed. Noah finally brought his attention to his companions. King Elbaz and the others had respectfully avoided interfering with the previous exchanges, but they were clearly itching to jump into the fight. Noah also felt slightly surprised to see that his companions were completely fine. The previous attack had left no hiding spot in the entire world, but King Elbaz and the others didn't suffer any injuries. The same went for the golden inscriptions in the distance. Pelio appeared on the verge of exhaustion, but he had managed to protect those hiding inside the ethereal array with the help of Cursed Reality and the others. Emperor was also fine. He had suffered injuries, but the privileged cultivators around him were far worse off. He had used them to shield himself from the attack, so his life wasn't in danger. Inspecting the areas past the ice was hard. Those frozen lands had reappeared as soon as the light had vanished, but Noah believed that the eternal snake was still okay. He could smell its presence in the higher plane, so it was safe to assume that Vesuvia and Queen had also escaped the attack. Overall, the scene was quite positive from Noah's perspective, but it also showed a deeper meaning. The major experts in his organization weren't only great expressions of the 9th rank. They were warriors that had earned their place in that final battle. Shouldn't a demon be selfish? Noah complained. You wanted to be the leader, Divine Demon mocked. You know what that involves. Noah sighed while scratching the side of his head with the back of the demonic sword. The blade complained, but it also added value to Divine Demon's statement with its growl. I really can't have fun, Noah eventually cursed. Well, let's get this over with. A series of figures materialized around Noah. The entire team grouped, and a few experts didn't hesitate to criticize Noah. King Elbaz had witty remarks. June directly complained. Supreme Thief stood in the middle, while the foolery began with its nonsense. Our attacks encompass the entire higher plane, Heaven and Earth announced, interrupting the bickering. Grouping up makes no difference. We have always attacked all of you at the same time. The foolery and some of the others in the team wanted to reply, but Noah voiced a roar before they could say anything. A wave of intense pride accompanied the cry, and the entire higher plane fell under the effects of Noah's ambition. Small patches of the void began to move on their own. They didn't leave their surroundings, but they struggled to break free from their space-time array. Pieces of the void wanted to become alive, but the universe didn't let them. The random strands of will generated by Noah's ambition weren't enough to make that darkness gain complete individuality. Of course, the void wasn't Noah's main target. The ambition that reached the blackness was nothing more than the leftovers of what he had sent toward his companions. King Elbaz, Sword Saint, the Foolery, Divine Demon, Supreme Thief, Alexander, Wilfred, and June saw ambition surrounding their worlds and enhancing their properties. Merely standing next to Noah increased their power and granted them access to a superior level. Heaven and Earth could witness the complete unfolding of Noah's world for the first time since his breakthrough. But they weren't alone there. The entire higher plane seemed to interrupt its motion to admire the waves of ambition that filled its every corner. Formless power that didn't seem to have precise intentions spread through the higher plane and empowered every different being or material. Even the privileged cultivators around Emperor saw parts of their existence reacting to that force. Noah's ambition was impartial, but it had a precise direction. It expressed his constant struggle toward higher forms of individuality. In a way, it was a force that carried the most basic and true aspect of the cultivation journey. Of course, Noah's ambition didn't only make everything strive toward that goal. It also provided the power necessary to perform that jump as long as the target accepted it. Actually, Noah's new influence seemed able to sway even some of the most resilient minds. The issue didn't apply to King Elbaz and the others. They had long acknowledged Noah as their leader, so his ambition empowered them without meeting any resistance. Yet, problems appeared among the privileged cultivators. Some of them had been part of the sky for a long time, but doubts still filled their minds. It was easy to keep a steady mindset when heaven and earth were the only possible alternative, but all of that shook now that Noah showed a path. Only Caesar and a few other privileged cultivators remained completely unaffected by Noah's ambition. The latter couldn't help but gaze in worry at the companions swayed by that tempting force, but Caesar remained unfazed. He didn't care about those events, and his broad smile continued to shine on his face. Heaven and earth were like Caesar. They didn't even look at the underlings swayed by Noah's ambition. They kept their gaze on their enemies while they waited for their preparations to end. Noah and the others didn't like heaven and earth's behavior, but they still exploited that chance. Shafu also joined the group while Snore and the various companions appeared in the open to unleash their ambition and harmonize themselves with Noah's power. A new wave of ambition enveloped the group and deepened the empowerment it provided. The landmass cried in anger, Snore hissed, and Shafu roared to declare their readiness. The parasite also screeched while more voices came out of the team, and heaven and earth understood what that meant. The entire higher plane lit up as multiple unstable spheres materialized in the void. Heaven and earth had summoned bigger versions of their previous attack, and they had also joined their hands to create that structure in front of them. No battle cry or words preceded the offensive. The unstable spheres unleashed their energy in the form of violent currents that flew in random directions before converging toward the enemy group. The sphere before heaven and earth unleashed its power at the same time, but its current shot forward directly at the group. Noah prepared to slash through the attack, but King Elbaz interrupted him by stepping forward. Only an idiot would choose to pierce something so unstable. King Elbaz snorted while his figure stepped into an even stronger version of the fake quasi-rank 10 state. King Elbaz waved his hand when the white current was about to fall on the group. The gesture gave birth to an ethereal membrane that flew forward and met the enemy attack head-on. The ethereal membrane carried only a fraction of the current's energy, but it worked as a filter that separated the two types of fuel. The white attack split into two different waves that changed their direction and crashed on chunks of the incoming offensive. "Idiots with me!" King Elbaz shouted, and the foolery and divine demon followed his sprint while voicing loud laughs. The three experts flew slightly above the group and turned to face three different directions. Their auras intensified as a golden domain spread through the darkness, and three attacks shot out of them. Divine Demon emptied his cup before throwing it away. The item expanded until it transformed into a massive container equipped with a suction force that split the various currents. A frown appeared on the foolery's face while it stared at the various currents. The pig seemed immersed in deep thoughts and plans, but its face relaxed when a wave of azure energy came out from its body. "Where is my mighty cry?" The foolery complained while the azure energy flew forward and enveloped a quarter of the higher plane in its smelly properties. "A fart isn't a cry," King Elbaz complained before rolling his eyes when a series of farts started to echo everywhere inside the golden domain. King Elbaz ignored that outcome and spread his arms. His crown expanded until it became as big as his body, and a humming noise soon came out of it. The humming noise spread instabilities inside the various white currents and triggered a chain reaction that heaven and earth couldn't stop. The crystal energy grew weaker as it split into its two basic powers and created different waves that clashed with each other. The waves that ended among the azure cloud directly shattered, while the others flowed into Divine Demon's creation. Meanwhile, King Elbaz summoned his spear and pointed it forward to launch a fiery attack that enveloped heaven and earth. The fiery energy didn't manage to touch the crystal figure. Heaven and earth's basic pressure created an innate defensive ability that protected them from that attack. However, various figures materialized around heaven and earth while they remained immersed in the fiery energy. June threw a crackling spear, Wilfred slammed both arms forward, and Alexander launched a cry that carried hundreds of different voices. Sword Saint let those attacks pierce heaven and earth's safe area before unleashing a thin slash that hit them at the very center of their head. Supreme Thief waited for all that to unfold before closing his eyes and releasing a sea of azure abilities that fell on the area. Shafu and the landmass arrived right after, and the rest of Noah's companions followed. Heaven and earth fell in the middle of a sea of abilities, but the offensive had yet to end. Noah materialized among the chaos unleashed by his companions. Waves of multicolored energy crashed on his body and tried to push him away, but his physical prowess allowed him to remain in his place. The chaos was incredibly powerful, but heaven and earth appeared partially immune to it. They stood in the middle of the sea while small cracks opened on their crystals. They were suffering damage, but they had eyes only for Noah. "Do you plan on destroying us like this?" Heaven and earth scorned. The chaos around them would have usually taken care of their voice, but Noah heard them anyway and chose to ignore them. Noah joined his hands, and dark matter enveloped his swords to make them fuse into a single structure. Different natures came out of his body as he drew power from his companions, and a black line shot out of him without needing any specific gesture. A shattering noise spread through the higher plane. Noah's slash dispersed the chaotic energy in the area, revealing heaven and earth's new state. The crystal figure's condition had worsened greatly. Cracks filled its surfaces and created a weary scene, but the black line that ran from the top of its head to the end of its groin remained its flashier injury. Still, all of that paled in front of the source of the shattering noise. The white core was still spinning, but a crack had appeared on its smooth surface. The immense energy in the white core had created a sound that could reach every corner of the higher plane. But the event didn't end there. The spinning sphere continued sending fuel and meanings to the crystals, but the process only worsened its damaged state. Noah could sense that the crystal figure as a whole wouldn't last long. His understanding of destruction told him that, but he wouldn't wait for that moment to arrive. A series of black lines shot out of Noah's body while he raised his swords, and an even bigger slash flew forward once he completed his attack. Heaven and earth fell prey to a relentless offensive, and more shattering noises resounded. King Elbaz and the others didn't wait their turn. They approached the area and started unleashing their best attacks. The Golden Domain attempted to add some coordination to the offensive, but that alone couldn't stop the techniques from giving birth to a chaotic mess. Everything worsened when Shafu slashed the landmass toward the messy area. The massive attack that came out of the maimed creature engulfed the joint offensive and created a black river that reached the distant sky. Noah and the others prepared to launch another offensive, but a series of unstable spheres filled the higher plane and forced them to group up. King Elbaz summoned his specific defenses, and everything turned white. "They are improving," King Elbaz commented while his eyes moved over the ripples on his ethereal barrier. "We can handle all of this." The foolery squealed while opening its mouth to unleash its hunger, but King Elbaz slapped its forehead before it could hurt the barrier. "I'm hungry," the foolery complained, and a discussion started, but Noah ignored all of that. Noah's attention moved to the crystal energy falling on the barrier. King Elbaz had improved it to defend against the new power flowing through the attack, but his warning remained on point. The crystal energy was too unstable to be a final product. Heaven and earth were probably using that battle to perfect their new fuel and obtain the power to reach the 10th rank. Stepping stones, Noah thought before stepping forward to tap on King Elbaz's shoulder. "Give me 1 second, King Elbaz snorted. "I'm making sure that this idiot doesn't destroy our only form of protection." "Defending is boring," the foolery complained while unleashing its hunger, but King Elbaz promptly teleported that influence away. "Why are you so annoying?" King Elbaz cursed. "The pig is right," Noah stated, and everyone on the team turned toward him to show their surprised faces. Even Shafu opened its mouth in amazement. "Open a path," Noah explained before questions could reach him. "We can't let them gain any initiative." King Elbaz didn't complain. Actually, he agreed with Noah right away, but the issue remained. The whole higher plane had turned white due to the violent currents flying through it, and piercing them would be quite hard. "I can pave the way," King Elbaz revealed. "At least partially." "Pig, find the rulers and eat anything before them," Noah ordered. "Noah has finally acknowledged my magnificence," the foolery proudly stated while lifting its head. "Noah," King Elbaz called, "this goes beyond its idiocy. There is too much power on the way." "Make it happen then." Noah shrugged his shoulders before disregarding the whole matter and pointing his swords forward to prepare for his moment. "I'm not staying behind," June announced while approaching Noah's side and summoning her spear. "I must be there for obvious reasons," Supreme Thief exclaimed as he reached Noah. "I'm also tired of defending," Divine Demon continued while joining the attacking team. Sword Saint retreated to reach the maimed landmass. Silver power came out of his body and enveloped the creature to prepare it for the imminent offensive. King Elbaz wanted to curse, but Alexander landed at his side and nodded at him. King Elbaz rolled his eyes, but he eventually executed the order. The golden domain thickened and fused with the ethereal barrier, pushing its edges forward to expand its influence. The foolery unleashed its hunger, and King Elbaz added fake quasi-rank 10 power to that influence. The hunger transformed. It remained part of the pig's power, but King Elbaz molded it without turning it into one of his techniques. Random flames appeared in that ethereal energy, but their azure color and intense smell revealed their true source. The foolery seemed surprised about that reaction, but it hid that feeling behind its iconic proud gesture. King Elbaz didn't say anything even if the process was tiring him deeply. He had basically pushed the fake quasi-rank 10 state on the pig without affecting its world. The golden domain eventually applied that empowered hunger on the path between the team and the rulers. A chunk of the white energy immediately disappeared, but some currents inevitably remained. Yet Noah shot through the ethereal barrier anyway, and his companions followed him closely. Noah was faster than any of them, and his clash with the remaining white currents filled the entire channel with his dark energy. Noah's power seemed to explode at that point. Various cries came out of his body as his companions added their abilities to his attack. His swords pierced through the white current and allowed him to advance, and a familiar figure eventually appeared in his vision. Smart choice. Heaven and Earth commented before Noah's attack landed on them. The slash cut through the cracked crystals and separated Heaven and Earth from their lower body. June and Divine Demon arrived a second later and unleashed their offensive on that maimed figure, destroying most of its external layers. Supreme Thief turned himself into a ghostly figure that could pierce through the intense energy released during the offensive. His body also flew through Heaven and Earth, taking away their white core in the process. An unstoppable force pierced the chaotic energy and cleared the area. Wilfred's attack failed to reach Heaven and Earth, but it opened the path for the following offensive. King Elbaz summoned a giant orb and tossed it at his side. Alexander grabbed the item before releasing a series of monstrous cries that brought his physical strength to the peak and allowed him to perform an incredible throw. The giant orb disappeared before materializing inside the remains of the crystal figure. A massive explosion happened and made the whole world shake, but a silver and black torrent still reached the targeted area to unleash its destructive sharpness. The void fell prey to violent instabilities. The joint offensive was too powerful even for that superior spacetime array. Mental waves became unable to enter the targeted space due to the chaos that filled its fabric. Noah wanted to launch more attacks, but he knew that the unstable void would disrupt their power. His companions also understood that part, so they waited for everything to stabilize. A few complaints flew toward Supreme Thief, but the latter ignored them as he studied the white core in his hands. He appeared extremely satisfied with his loot, but the arrival of a familiar laugh made him store the item inside his figure. A monstrous laugh came out of the sky and filled the higher plane, restoring its stability and bringing light to the targeted area. The chaotic energy dispersed, revealing nothing more than dust and shattered crystals. Noah and the others had destroyed Heaven and Earth's body, but similar figures emerged from the white layer and advanced through the void. The rulers had summoned more of their incredible avatars, and the latter didn't hesitate to echo the laugh. Great, great! Heaven and Earth spoke through their multiple avatars. Keep opposing us. Be the stepping stones you were always meant to be. Noah inspected the various crystals figures that had come out of the sky. They were identical to the body they had just destroyed, but the energy flowing inside them felt slightly stronger. We are glad that you reached this level. Heaven and Earth spoke through their various bodies. It would have taken a while to perfect our new energy otherwise. You can accomplish your purpose now. The arrival of various crystal figures didn't surprise the group too much and didn't even lead to worry or fear. Noah's ambition had pushed everyone's power past their normal limits, so those incredible bodies didn't appear as threatening as before. Yet, that show of power highlighted an issue that Noah and a few others had always been aware of. Heaven and Earth's energy reserves were immense, and they lacked clear weak points. It was simply impossible to target them when they were the very sky. Noah honestly didn't know what to do, and the same went for King Elbaz. The two even exchanged a glance that conveyed their helplessness. They had a limited number of options in that situation, and only one of them sounded reasonable. We might need to keep doing this for a while, King Elbaz eventually suggested. Noah knew that his companion was right, but that didn't solve the problems. A prolonged battle would allow Heaven and Earth to perfect their crystal energy. Moreover, the landmass couldn't last much longer. Still, the lack of alternatives pushed Noah toward the usual conclusion. He and his companions had to give everything they had, no matter how many of them died in the process. After all, that was the last battlefield. Marcella and the Eternal Snake couldn't avoid heaven and earth's massive display of power. That offensive covered the entire higher plane, and the ice couldn't stop it. The situation only worsened when heaven and earth summoned multiple avatars. The addition of various bodies allowed the rulers to channel more power and thicken the amount of crystal energy that filled the higher plane. Marcella and the Eternal Snake were ill-suited to stop that offensive, but their insane resilience allowed them to recover and resume their battle in no time. The ice also always reappeared to divide them from the main fight, but that slowly started to change. The additional bodies allowed heaven and earth to launch offensives that could last longer. Moreover, Noah and the others only affected a fraction of those massive attacks, so Marcella and the Eternal Snake often took a defensive stance. As Noah and his team began to counterattack, more and more areas of the higher plane gained some clarity. Still, random white currents continued to fly everywhere, so the ice never managed to reform fully. Marcella and the Eternal Snake didn't stop fighting either, but the change in the scenery disturbed their usual pace. The damage created by the white currents opened lasting paths through the ice that Marcella wanted to use, but the Eternal Snake never gave her the chance to escape. That would typically push Marcella to bring her focus back on the snake, but the latter solved that issue for her. The Eternal Snake noticed Noah during one of its reckless charges, and the sight instantly changed its priorities. Defying demon, the Eternal Snake shouted when it caught a glimpse of Noah fighting against the group of crystal figures. Noah obviously ignored that call, and white currents soon hit his figure again. The Eternal Snake also found an attack flying through the opening on its ice and landing on its body, but the severe injury it caused didn't distract it from its target. "Where do you think you are going?" Marcella shouted while launching a massive spear made of roots and branches toward the snake. The spear pierced the Eternal Snake and tried to immobilize it. Flowers and plants also grew from its surfaces to build a cage. Still, the creature ripped itself away from that offensive and voiced a hiss that affected the ice in the area. The Eternal Snake's ice carried the same innate ability that affected its body. It wouldn't disappear unless the creature wanted to, but a reason to remove it had finally appeared. The immense frozen layer shattered when the snake's maimed body slammed on it. The ice crumbled to fall on the creature, and even the chunks destroyed by the white currents reappeared to join the process. Marcella wanted to interrupt the technique, but she held back. A path toward heaven and earth had finally opened, so she let the Eternal Snake do as it wished. All the ice in the area converged toward the Eternal Snake to create an immense frozen armor. Once the technique stabilized, the creature became almost as big as the landmass, and its sprint toward Noah's battlefield generated storms that shot everywhere. The snake's charge was beyond reckless, but its eternal properties were quite impossible to counter. White attacks fell on the frozen armor and pierced its body, but its sprint never slowed down. Those missing parts even reappeared as soon as the crystal energy left the areas. Marcella inspected the sprint for a few seconds before summoning a series of flowers. Heaven and earth wouldn't care about her, so she needed to protect herself from the white offensive, but a curious event interrupted her technique. A shattering noise resounded near Marcella and forced her to turn. Black and purple shards flew everywhere as three figures appeared among them. Decumia, Vesuvia, and Queen returned to the higher plane, and none of them carried injuries. "Decumia!" Marcella instantly called. "Heaven and earth are going all out. Let's help them." Decumia glanced at her companion before turning toward Vesuvia. Her expression revealed deep doubts, but a question eventually left her mouth. "How much of that is true? Who knows?" Vesuvia giggled. "Stop playing games," Decumia ordered. "I know you didn't influence that prediction. Will that truly happen?" Decumia appeared off compared to her usual self. She was so serious that even her opponents felt the need to address the question adequately. "Go ahead," Queen sighed. "I truly don't know," Vesuvia admitted while wearing a complicated smile. "Still, you saw it, so it has a chance of becoming real." The answer didn't satisfy Decumia, but she still lowered her gaze to think. Marcella could see the conflict on her companion's face, but she couldn't allow those issues in that situation. Xianxia, what are you doing? Marcella called. Did you forget your position? Xianxia lifted her gaze to study the final battle. Pure chaos shone in her eyes, but she didn't feel attracted by it. Far deeper thoughts flowed through her mind and made her lose interest in the scene. I'll stay here, Xianxia eventually stated. I want to see the future with my own eyes. Marcella almost couldn't believe what she was hearing. Xianxia had never been the smartest privileged cultivator, but she had always been reliable when it came to battles. Yet, she had decided to remain on the sidelines at that time. I guess we have a new opponent, Vesuvia teased. I don't think we'll have a proper battle, Queen exclaimed, and the entire area suddenly lit up. It didn't take long before everything turned white and forced them to summon defensive abilities. White light filled every corner of Noah's vision. He had lost track of his companions, but the attack didn't allow him to search for them. Still, he didn't worry about them. His mind only had violent thoughts flying inside it. Flares of violent dark matter shot in every direction as Noah pressed forward. His consciousness couldn't expand among that mess, but his destruction gave him a path to follow. Roots pierced Noah's skin and enveloped him in a dangerous armor that often crumbled under the might of the crystal energy. The parasite saved him from many serious injuries, but it couldn't always withstand what fell on its surfaces. Night also helped during the charge. Its black lines had precise piercing effects, so they created the main path that Noah followed. His companions did their best to make him survive the white offensive, and his charge never stopped. A familiar crystal figure eventually appeared behind the white mess. Noah didn't hesitate to fill specific centers of power with potential, and some of his defensive abilities weakened during the effort. The parasite stopped piercing his skin. Snore didn't send random flares anymore, and even Night halted its relentless offensive. Noah had to use his body to endure the white storm, but his incredible physical might allowed him to survive for a few seconds. That time was enough for Noah. Most of his offensive abilities gathered on his arms and blades while the crystal energy dug through his skin. The innate destruction radiated by his figure intensified as he accumulated power, and his surroundings darkened when he launched his attack. The white storms around Noah vanished when he thrust his blades forward. A torrent of sharp energy shot out and transformed into a dense black line that landed on the crystal figure ahead and pierced its skin. The line carried enough destruction to dig through the crystals and reach the white core behind them. The attack had lost too much momentum during the flight, but it could still generate an explosion. A chaotic mass of destructive power exploded before Noah and sent some fuming crystals in his direction. A few ended up stabbing him, but others only generated clanging noises when they landed on his skin. The chaotic energy engulfed Noah, but more potential flowed into his body before he waved his hand. The gesture dispersed the messy storm and allowed him to see the result of his attack. A maimed crystal figure became visible, but the item didn't show any trace of life due to the destruction of its white core. New potential flowed inside the ethereal blackness, but Noah barely cared about the event. He tried to inspect his surroundings for a few seconds, but he could only see white currents flowing everywhere, so he quickly closed his eyes. Heaven and earth were getting stronger, but the same went for Noah and his companions. Moreover, Noah could already hurt the crystals after his breakthrough, so his starting point turned out to be slightly higher than the rulers. The crystal bodies didn't even improve during the process. Heaven and earth granted them better energy, but their structural stability remained unchanged. Noah and the others only had to worry about the stronger attacks flying on their way. Noah immersed himself in his violent thoughts while whiteness stretched toward him. Some random currents even landed on his body and opened injuries, but he ignored everything to listen to his destruction. Eventually, his anger intensified and stirred him to fly in a specific direction. Noah's instincts told him where he had to unleash his destruction, and he didn't hesitate to listen to them. Noah shot forward, relying on his companions and innate destruction to pave the way toward his new target. A golden flare cut his path at some point and revealed King Elbaz in the distance, busy burning a crystal figure. Something similar happened soon after due to the immense explosion of sparks that unfolded under him, but nothing could interrupt his charge. Coordinating an offensive against many targets and in the middle of that mess was impossible. Noah's team knew that, so the experts went on their own way to handle any enemy they could find. Noah accelerated when he sensed that his target was close. His skin even started to deflect attacks on its own due to the excitement that flew through it. His entire being was turning into a weapon meant to defeat heaven and earth, but a loud hiss suddenly reached his ears and distracted him. A giant figure pierced the white storms on Noah's left and crashed on him before he could do anything about it. Ice filled Noah's vision and attempted to confuse him, but the voice that followed cleared any possible doubt. "Defying demon," the eternal snake hissed. "I've come to kill you, dumb snake." Noah cursed while the eternal snake pushed him into the white storms. The crystal energy hurt Noah and the eternal snake, but the latter didn't care about those injuries. It wanted to push Noah and squash him on the sky, but overcoming his physical prowess turned out to be too hard. The eternal snake slowly stopped, and an explosion of dark matter followed. Noah unleashed waves of destructive power to reduce the number of white currents in the area and create a situation where he could talk. "You dare oppose me?" the eternal snake shouted, uncaring that everything in its vision had turned dark. Silver rivers came out of the creature's mouth. Immense frozen landmasses took form, but the area occupied by Noah's destructive energy remained immune to the attack. An unstoppable force eventually landed on the snake's frozen helmet. The creature hissed in anger, but Noah still tried to talk with it. "Can't you realize the situation we are in?" "I don't care," the eternal snake hissed. "Die and turn into my meal." More silver liquid came out of the snake's mouth, but Noah teleported on its forehead to lift its head. The creature couldn't oppose that pulling force, and its ice eventually expanded toward the target Noah had found before the previous charge. The crystal figure that appeared behind the white energy launched a precise attack toward the incoming attack. The silver liquid shot in every direction as a torrent of crystals pierced it and reached its source. Noah pulled the eternal snake in front of him to make it endure the incoming attack. The crystal energy pierced the creature and the frozen armor, but that damage soon disappeared and offered proper protection. "Fight me," the snake ordered, uncaring of the holes opened by the crystal energy. "I'm a bit busy right now," Noah snorted while kicking the frozen armor to launch the snake toward the crystal figure in the distance. Heaven and earth only needed to raise their hand to block the immense snake, but darkness soon filled their vision. A giant sword cut through the frozen armor and the creature before landing on the crystals to unleash its power. A deep cut opened on the crystal body's waist. The sword couldn't pierce it from side to side, but it damaged its white core enough to cause unstoppable instabilities. When another rotation happened, heaven and earth's avatar exploded into a cloud of unstable energy. Noah had cut the snake in half to perform that attack, but the latter reformed in no time. Its colossal body also became a natural defense against the explosion, which Noah didn't hesitate to use. "You bastard!" the eternal snake cursed, and its anger only intensified when Noah appeared in its vision. "Calm down, you idiot!" Noah scolded through a roar that dispersed some of that anger. "Let's kill heaven and earth first." "You are my target," the snake coldly hissed. "And how do you plan on fighting me here?" Noah asked before turning his head to release a black sea that stopped some of the incoming white currents. "I don't fear these attacks," the eternal snake claimed. "They don't fear you either," Noah explained. "Can't you see how heaven and earth ignored you? They think you are too weak to join this battle." The eternal snake went silent. The white currents mostly flew in random directions, but some of them targeted Noah. That didn't happen with the creature. Its armor and body suffered only due to the leftovers of that offensive. The eternal snake had never given much thought to its actions. To its very core, the creature was a magical beast, so it took pride in its instinctive behavior. Its anger also overcame its few reasonable ideas most of the time, which only led to constant reckless stance. Still, Noah was aware of what could trigger the snake's anger. A creature with great pride would see any lack of respect or consideration as an incredible insult. Similar reasons had started its battle with Marcella and even fueled its enmity with Noah. The eternal snake was by no means heaven and earth's ally. The creature actually planned to destroy them, but Noah came first in its mind. Yet, nothing in the white offensive specifically targeted it, so its anger moved on the rulers. They don't think you can hurt them. Noah added fuel to the anger. They don't see you as something able to affect the battle. Noah's words thundered in the eternal snake's mind and caused repercussions on its overall concentration. Cracks opened on its frozen armor until the entire structure crumbled, revealing the giant body hidden inside. Meanwhile, the snake kept its reptilian eyes on the various currents. It saw some attacks converging on Noah and forcing him to launch countermeasures. The clash often generated random flares, but none of them used that chance to fly toward the creature. The eternal snake obviously suffered damage often. It was too big to remain untouched among that thick mess, but none of that counted when the offensive lacked attacks aimed specifically at it. Noah only needed a look at the eternal snake's face to know that his words had the intended effect. The creature wouldn't care about him anymore with all that anger filling its mind. Truth be told, Noah didn't expect the eternal snake to do much in the final battle. The creature was by no means weak, but heaven and earth were simply too strong. Nevertheless, destroying the crystal figures while running away from the snake would be a bother, so Noah redirected its anger toward the sky. It couldn't hurt to add such a big and troublesome target to his team, especially during an offensive that covered the entire higher plane. I can't stay here, Noah eventually continued while a series of black lines shot out of his body and cleared part of the storms. I'll see you once the battle is over. You aren't going anywhere, the eternal snake promptly replied before snapping its mouth at Noah. The snake had used its immense body to launch an unavoidable attack, but that wasn't a problem for Noah. He found himself at the edges of the creature's mouth, but the latter couldn't close it since his body was too resilient. What are you even doing? Noah sighed as he prepared to cut away the entire lower part of the mouth. I'll put an end to this battle now, the snake hissed, and Noah saw a torrent of silver liquid filling the giant mouth. Noah could easily block that attack. The silver liquid didn't carry much momentum or destructive properties. A mere punch from him could disperse that torrent, but his instincts told him not to interrupt the attack. The space-time array around Noah shook for a second, allowing him to leave the mouth and fly away. That evasive maneuver didn't hurt the eternal snake, and Noah even decided to remain in the area afterward. The eternal snake lifted its head and spread its mouth as much as possible while silver liquid kept flowing out of it. The attack inevitably fell on the white currents, and chunks of them even froze, but the overall offensive eventually shattered those parts. Noah had the chance to leave to search for other crystal figures, but the process felt too captivating. The eternal snake was up to something, and his instincts told him to inspect the scene. The ice never managed to accumulate, and the eternal snake also continued to suffer injuries in that mess. Yet its flesh always reappeared, but the same didn't happen for the frozen chunks of crystal energy. Noah waved his swords left and right to keep himself safe, and an explanation slowly appeared in his mind. He could understand what the snake had become, so its tactic also became clear. The white storms seemed to quiet down while the snake was busy spitting silver liquid. Nothing had happened yet, but heaven and earth had already sensed the change. Noah sensed something pretty soon too, and his companions followed. All of them stopped fighting and moved their attention to their surroundings to inspect the imminent change. Suddenly, immense frozen landmasses materialized all around the higher plane. They couldn't stop the entirety of the white offensive, but they hindered its advance and created many safe areas. The ice eventually appeared right before the sky and spread until the entirety of the white layer fell behind that frozen barrier. The eternal snake's ability even thickened, and heaven and earth's light slowly stopped spreading through the higher plane. The sky didn't freeze, but the eternal snake had accumulated enough ice to block its influence. The entire world was now covered in a silver layer that reflected a pale radiance over its many floating landmasses. The amount of crystal energy in the world decreased exponentially, clearing most of the area and allowing Noah to locate the remaining avatars. His companions also noticed them, and the entire team hurried to get rid of those items. Multicolored explosions expanded through the higher plane while Noah and the others flew left and right to launch their attack. Their ruthless approach soon removed every trace of the crystal figures, which put an end to the white offensive. The world had transformed by then. The eternal snake had turned the entire higher plane into a frozen spectacle filled with icy landmasses. Noah's group even struggled to sense heaven and earth at that point, which pushed them to group around the giant creature. "This guy turned out to be useful," King Elbaz commented when the snake finally closed its mouth. "Surprising." "What's so surprising about this?" the eternal snake hissed. "I'll kill you." "Calm down." Noah snorted while landing on the snake's head to keep its mouth closed. "Anyone knows what happens now?" King Elbaz and the others glanced at the sky. The silver ice prevented them from studying heaven and earth's reactions, but the higher plane had other clues that could help them. Marcella had started to fight with Queen and Vesuvia, but the arrival of the ice had interrupted their battle. Decumia had also remained in the area, but neither privileged cultivator showed any worry about the current state of the higher plane. Emperor and his opponents had also stopped fighting when the ice arrived. The privileged cultivators didn't know how to react to the event, but Caesar continued to show his broad smile. Intense confidence reeked out of his body, and that was enough to provide an answer. It would have been too easy otherwise. Divine Demon laughed as he gathered energy in his palm to create a cup of wine. "We only have one option left then," King Elbaz sighed. "Indeed," Noah responded while throwing a punch under him to prevent the snake from talking or launching an attack. "We must destroy the sky." The announcement put almost everyone into a stern mood. The intelligent members of Noah's team knew what the plan involved, and they didn't know whether they could fulfill it. The situation didn't sound good in Noah's mind either. He inspected his companions, and what he saw didn't promise well. Everyone appeared quite tired, especially Wilfred and the landmass. The hybrid wasn't a real issue since he would burn himself before stepping out of the battle, but the creature didn't have that freedom. The landmass had hurt itself through most of the offensive. Shafu did its best to protect it, but heaven and earth didn't give it much room to work with. A glance toward Sword Saint also confirmed Noah's worries. The expert shook his head as soon as he understood Noah's silent question. The scene had a few positive aspects. King Elbaz, Alexander, Sword Saint, and Divine Demon were like Noah. The clash had worn them down, but they could still express their peak power. The foolery had somehow turned itself into a fuming figure again. Its body was a mess, but it didn't seem to care about those injuries and only focused on munching the maimed crystal avatar in its mouth. June was busy patching up her injuries since the massive power generated by the perfect circuit kept expanding them. Her body could still handle her current level, but it worsened the damage she had suffered. Supreme Thief appeared too busy playing with the set of white cores stolen during the offensive to care about Noah's orders. Noah would usually scold him a bit, but he let him off the hook since he seemed able to express his peak power. The snake was also a great addition to the team, especially after its recent demonstration. Noah couldn't use it in a proper clash, but throwing it towards some attacks sounded good enough. All in all, the team could still fight, but their new target wasn't as frail as the crystal figures. The sky would take far more than a joint offensive to crumble, and heaven and earth would never give the group the time to complete that approach. "I have an idea," Noah eventually announced. "Focus everything we have on a single spot," King Elbaz continued. "That's the gist of it," Noah responded. "Predictable," King Elbaz sighed. "Do you have a better idea?" Noah asked. "I might be able to build something if you buy me enough time," King Elbaz suggested. "Something that helps us focus everything we have on a single spot?" Noah teased. King Elbaz didn't answer immediately. He stared at Noah for a few seconds before repeating his previous words. "That's the gist of it." "Predictable," the foolery exclaimed while reaching King Elbaz's side and continuing to munch on the maimed crystal fight. Some of its saliva ended up on King Elbaz, but his body burnt it before it could leave wet patches. "I'll never work with you," the eternal snake snorted. "Can you remove part of the ice to open a path?" Alexander asked, uncaring of the snake's previous remark. "My ice is eternal," the eternal snake declared. No one can remove it. We got ourselves a new idiot. Divine Demon laughed. You are part of that group, King Elbas commented. This disciple of mine is always so cold. Divine Demon sighed before taking a sip from his cup. Being so ungrateful after everything I taught him. You didn't teach me anything, King Elbas scoffed. Didn't you attune with our powers earlier? The foolery asked. Did you just notice that? King Elbas asked before reminding himself never to enter a conversation with the pig. I say we let heaven and earth come at us with their avatars again, Supreme Thief suggested. We aren't taking suggestions from someone only interested in stealing things, June responded. Don't you want to fight in the previous mess again? Supreme Thief wondered. The sky doesn't sound like an interesting target. June opened her mouth before closing it. She glanced at the frozen layer around the sky, and her eyes shone when an idea appeared in her mind. Still, Noah was ready to scold her as soon as she searched for his approval. Don't even think about it. We would burn their energy faster, June pointed out. And take a lot of their stuff, Supreme Thief added. And eat a lot, the foolery shouted. Why are you joining this conversation? Wilfred asked. I could smell the arrival of Xavier's answer, the foolery explained. That's some dedication. Divine Demon laughed while patting the pig's back. I became strong for this sole purpose, the pig proudly announced while lifting its head. Are you sure you want us to survive? King Elbas whispered to Noah. It's too late to switch factions, Noah uttered. Focus on opening a path through the sky. That's your best chance at getting rid of the pig. Piercing the sky, King Elbas sighed. Noah, you know what I'm thinking. There is nothing else to do. Noah shrugged his shoulders. That's the last barrier. We can touch their level, Alexander joined the conversation. We might not have that chance if we delay our offensive. Heaven and earth can't accomplish that fusion so easily, King Elbas explained. They are probably fighting us to gather information about our worlds. We might carry the answer to their issue. Won't they get there anyway? Noah wondered. He understood what King Elbas meant, but they were still talking about heaven and earth. The rulers wouldn't mind waiting for a few eras to perfect their evolution. They must have limits connected to their breakthrough, King Elbas guessed. Maybe their current level can't hold them anymore after they regained some individuality. That makes sense, Noah replied. They are pushing for the quickest option. I wouldn't be surprised if they had other plans in store, Alexander commented. Either way, King Elbas stated, it won't hurt if we hurry. Noah nodded and patted the snake on its head. But a strange sensation filled his mind. Something was off, but he couldn't find the source of that feeling. King Elbas seemed to share Noah's worries. The two exchanged a meaningful gaze but couldn't come up with anything worthy of their time or words. They were both lost in front of that strange sensation. I already told you, the eternal snake hissed. My ice is eternal. And why do you think you can order me around? I should eat you right now. Noah honestly didn't know whether the eternal snake could remove its ice, but using part of it to create armors shouldn't be a problem. The creature's stubbornness was the only issue, but someone promptly came to Noah's aid. That's a loser's mindset, the pig exclaimed while landing before the snake's head. The eternal snake snapped its mouth at the foolery without bothering to address its announcement, but the pig magically materialized before it again. You have a long way to go, the foolery sighed. Your hunger is great but misplaced. Traces of instinctive wisdom came out of the foolery's fuming body and made the snake interested in its words. The giant creature actually went silent as it waited for the pig to explain its stance. You won't get all the tasty stuff inside the sky if you eat Noah now, the foolery explained. I can deal with the sky by myself, the eternal snake complained. Can you? The pig asked. There must be some doubts inside you. Why do you want to risk it? Use Noah to break the sky, eat what comes out, and then move to the next meal. You might have a point, the snake coldly hissed. I can teach the secret behind my wisdom if you become my disciple, the foolery proudly exclaimed. I won't eat anyone until the sky is in pieces, the eternal snake added, ignoring the pig's previous comment. No, The foolery jumped in. You can totally eat Zavi-dashta. The foolery couldn't finish its line since a series of slaps landed on its head. Noah, Alexander, and King Elbaz took care of silencing the pig, and Divine Demon's laugh soon arrived. Decumia had no intention to join the fight, and Marcella would have to face Queen and Vesuvia if she dared to move. Emperor was also taking care of the other privileged cultivators, and his job had gotten easier after Noah's ambition generated doubts inside their minds. Caesar was the only expert who could hinder the team, but he didn't seem to care about their plan. His waiting stance annoyed Noah and his companions, but they played along for now since they had bigger problems to handle. Noah had never been so focused, and excitement inevitably filled his mind. He had waited his entire second life for that moment. His journey had finally reached the point when he could target the sky. Of course, the mystery of the sky had long since disappeared. After all, Noah and his companions had traveled through that white layer multiple times. Still, they knew that things wouldn't be as easy now. The sky had endured many attacks throughout the final battlefield. Immense techniques and powerful abilities had landed on that white layer, but nothing had managed to damage it. Noah even predicted that heaven and earth wouldn't stay still if the sky were truly in danger. The team probably only had one shot at destroying that structure, and Noah had every intention not to waste it. King Elbaz, Sword Saint, Wilfred, June, and Alexander began to prepare as soon as the quarrel ended. The experts didn't talk, but they instinctively knew their role in the imminent offensive. King Elbaz summoned his fake quasi-rank 10 power to build a massive structure that quickly took the shape of a ram. Flames flared out of its surfaces and transformed into drills while the whole item solidified, and King Elbaz kept adding materials to its fabric. Wilfred only needed a glance from King Elbaz to understand his role. The hybrid flew under the ram to test its weight and scorching properties. His skin almost melted when he touched the item, but he nodded back at King Elbaz after his tests. Sword Saint approached the maimed landmass to inspect its damage. The giant creature had lost most of its body, but its core was intact. It could still summon its corrosive energy and sharpness, but the effort would probably kill it. June left the group to land on one of the floating frozen landmasses. She crossed her legs to sit on the ice and closed her eyes to focus the entirety of her attention on her perfect circuit. Heartbeats started to resound from her position, and no one dared to disturb her. Alexander imitated June, but his approach didn't need him to fly away. He crossed his legs and started hovering through the void while tremors ran through his body. His aura intensified during the process, but nothing harmful flew toward his companions. Supreme Thief inspected the preparations, but the white cores floating around him often attracted his attention. He appeared conflicted, but an annoyed scoff left his mouth when he noticed Noah's cold gaze. "You can't take a joke anymore," Supreme Thief complained. "Can you steal something important from the sky?" Noah asked. "I don't care what you take as long as it bothers heaven and earth. We should be able to open a path with this," King Elbaz added while tinkering with the ram. Supreme Thief glanced at the ram before moving his gaze to the sky. Noah could see greed appearing on his face, but the expert eventually lowered his head and heaved a helpless sigh. "I'd need too long to steal something relevant," Supreme Thief explained. "I'm sure heaven and earth also set multiple protections, so using my power randomly wouldn't get us anywhere." "You go with the other idiots then," King Elbaz snorted. "No," Supreme Thief cursed. "I'll be in the front lines. Send your item after I do my thing." King Elbaz couldn't help but turn to inspect Supreme Thief. The announcement was quite surprising, but the expert appeared serious, so King Elbaz decided to trust him and return to work. Supreme Thief absorbed the white cores inside his body at that point, and he even snapped his finger to steal the crystal figure inside the pig's mouth. The foolery obviously didn't like that, but Supreme Thief fell into a deep meditative state that shielded him from any complaint. "Don't even try it," Noah warned before the foolery could summon its power. "The sky has more food than you can imagine." "But that was my food," the foolery complained. "I'll let you team up with Xavier," Noah bribed. The foolery's eyes lit up, and he immediately went silent to reach King Elbaz's side. The expert glared at Noah, but he didn't voice any complaint. Deep down, King Elbaz knew that he was the only one able to control and enhance the pig's innate ability. "I'll be in the front lines too," the eternal snake exclaimed. "No one can go before me." Noah thought about the matter for a few seconds before giving his approval. The snake's offensive prowess wasn't exceptional, but its body could offer protection indefinitely. Having it in front of the team could only benefit the assault. "You are awfully quiet," Noah eventually teased while approaching Divine Demon. Divine Demon emptied his cup and turned it into blood-red energy that flowed inside his body. His gaze went to the golden inscriptions in the distance, but he quickly brought it back to Noah. "Are you worried about the others now?" Noah laughed. "As if," Divine Demon scoffed. "Those idiots are a disappointment. I should have used more dragons against them. Now the dragons are gone." Noah sighed without adding anything. Divine Demon didn't need consolations, and Noah knew that usual formalities didn't belong to that situation. "Are you getting all nostalgic already?" Divine Demon joked. "You were the one feeling down," Noah rebuked. "What feeling down?" Divine Demon shouted. "I was enjoying the moment. It's worthy of thoughts and reflection." "You are getting all poetic now," Noah mocked. "I've always been poetic," Divine Demon claimed. "Make sure not to forget anything this time," Noah stated. "I won't hesitate to forget if it helps me," Divine Demon scoffed. "Though it doesn't mean that I want to. It would be a pity, don't you think?" Noah wondered. "It would indeed," Divine Demon sighed. "Do you know what to do in the next offensive?" Noah asked. "I'll come up with something," Divine Demon declared. "Don't tease Xavier too much," Noah chuckled. "I'll probably tease everyone," Divine Demon bragged. "We are set then," Noah stated. "To think that the end would finally be in our grasp," Divine Demon whispered. "Majestic." Blood-red light flashed before Noah and Divine Demon to create 2 cups full of wine. Noah didn't hesitate to grab it, and a smiling Divine Demon appeared in his view when he turned. "You did well, my heir," Divine Demon announced. "You didn't waste my inheritance. I brought it to the utter peak of the cultivation journey," Noah corrected before throwing the entire cup in his mouth. "That's how a demon should talk." Divine Demon laughed while also emptying his cup. A series of intense tremors filled the area at that point. Supreme Thief, Alexander, and June broke their meditation and gathered near the golden ram. Their bodies seemed on the verge of exploding, which announced their readiness for the imminent clash. Heaven and earth's silence was eerie. It was impossible to understand what the rulers were doing inside the sky, and their lack of reactions only intensified the overall tension in the higher plane. The rulers were clearly up to something, but the same went for their enemies. The latter were ready, and Noah performed one last inspection to appease his worries. June had to be careful about the power accumulated on her body. Tight nets made of sparks covered her injuries and prevented her energy from leaving through them, but they also created windows directly connected with her perfect circuit. Everyone could see that June's insides contained nothing more than raw and violent energy. The level of that fuel was also incredible. Noah had to use King Elbaz's fake quasi-rank 10 state as a comparison to evaluate its might. Alexander struggled to retain his human form. Worm-like bulges ran through his body, chunks of his skin changed color, and some of his muscles inflated before deflating while he stood still and remained focused on his ability. Supreme Thief was stabler than his companions, but it was clear that his mind was elsewhere. His eyes appeared lost in a scene that no one could see, and his overall figure had turned whiter for some reason. The 3 experts were in no condition to reply to questions, and none of their companions called them. The group only cared about their battle prowess, and the pressure radiated by their figures was more than satisfying. A low growl eventually left Noah's mouth, carrying an order that conveyed pure wills. He made his voice so soft that his companions understood his intentions without ruining their concentration. Supreme Thief and the Eternal Snake shot upward at that point. The frozen landmasses and part of the ice around the sky flew through the higher plane to reach the creature. A silver armor took life, uncovering part of the white layer in the process. The eternal snake didn't have specific tasks, and its attack pattern was also quite simple. The creature snapped its tail, and the gesture generated far more momentum due to the increased size granted by the frozen armor. The technique propelled the giant snake toward the sky. Its sprint was quite fast, and its landing on the white layer generated a shockwave that filled a considerable fraction of the higher plane with storms. Of course, that simple headbutt didn't affect the sky at all. The eternal snake had even added its weight to the attack, but mere physical prowess couldn't hurt the white layer. Even Noah would fail at that. Supreme Thief reached the eternal snake almost immediately, but his lost gaze never fell on his companions. The snake was the same since it continued to headbutt the sky, but what followed forced it to divert its attention. Supreme Thief placed both hands on the sky before closing his eyes. The white cores absorbed earlier came out of his body to show their new azure shades. The items started to rotate around the expert, and a series of azure crystals seeped out of his skin. The azure crystals expanded until the entirety of Supreme Thief's body gained the same appearance as heaven and earth's avatars. Meanwhile, the cores continued to spin around him, and white energy eventually accumulated in the area. Supreme Thief generated a type of fuel that felt identical to what heaven and earth had used in the previous offensive. He replicated the crystal energy and even added the ruler's resolve's influence to adapt that power to the sky. No external force affected the white energy, but the sky naturally attracted it due to its resemblance with what flowed behind its surface. The process was quite fast, and it soon started to affect the overall crystals and whiteness that had covered Supreme Thief. Supreme Thief regained his natural colors, and even his expression focused again. His gaze darted left and right to study the situation, but he waited a few seconds before performing his attack. Once the entirety of the white energy entered the sky, Supreme Thief shone with azure light that caused a reaction in that lost fuel. Azure patches appeared behind the white surface and made the entire area tremble. Supreme Thief revealed a crazy smile as he lowered his arms and pulled the foreign energy inside the sky. The azure patches expanded before approaching the white surface and piercing it to return to the higher plane. The azure energy carried white gas and materials while it reunited with Supreme Thief. The expert seized everything and stored it inside his body, but he flew away once the process was over. The eternal snake had grown interested in the whole procedure, but it didn't have the time to feel disappointed about the sudden departure, since golden light filled its vision. Wilfred voiced a human cry when he slammed the giant ram on the sky. The impact unleashed a sea of flames that covered the white layer and enhanced the instabilities caused by Supreme Thief. The many drills also shot forward, and a relentless assault started. Part of the flames reached the eternal snake and fell on its face. The creature wanted to complain, but its anger vanished when it saw Wilfred. The hybrid was pushing the ram, uncaring of the wounds opening his hands, and the snake saw that behavior as a personal challenge. The eternal snake dived into the golden sea to headbutt the sky again. The flames melted its armor and burnt its head, but those injuries vanished in no time and allowed it to continue the assault. Wilfred gave up on pushing at some point and directly punched the back of the ram to slam it deeper into the sea. He could feel that the sky still blocked the item's way, so the violence of his attacks increased every time he failed to pierce it. The foolery and King Elbaz arrived in the area, but the former acted on its own. The pig jumped into the sea and sucked all the flames before placing its butt on the sky. Violent shockwaves seeped into the white layer and gave birth to earthquakes, but the foolery didn't care that its attacks were affecting the ram. Still, King Elbaz landed at its side and unfolded his golden domain to force the tremors into a specific rhythm. Sword Saint his offensive now that the sea had disappeared. A rain made of silver drops assaulted the sky, paying special attention to the instabilities that his companions had caused. The expert seemed able to sense which blade could benefit the current state of the offensive. Shafu and the landmass followed, and their attack inevitably brought a few gazes on them. The giant creature had silver light around its edges, but dark energy grew inside it before the dragon thrust it toward the sky. The attack didn't give birth to any torrent at that time. Shafu had launched a clean thrust that pushed the entirety of the accumulated power in the area touched by the maimed landmass. Huge cracks opened on the landmass due to the condensed release of energy. That damage inflicted the finishing blow on the already maimed creature, which ended up shattering into multiple giant pieces. Those pieces didn't crumble any further, but anyone inspecting the scene could sense that life was abandoning them. Weak growls came out of the boulders, but everything eventually went quiet. The landmass effectively died under everyone's gaze. The scene filled many experts with unreasonable anger that threatened to disrupt the offensive, but a shattering sound arrived and dispersed that feeling. Many gazes moved toward the source of that noise, and the incredible image they saw enveloped the entire team with hope. A big but shallow crack had appeared on the sky. The damage wasn't too significant, but the experts could find some comfort in it. The landmass had managed to pierce the white layer with its last attack. The offensive didn't leave time for shock or other emotions. The group was sticking to a vague rhythm to coordinate their attacks, so the appearance of the crack and the destruction of the landmass didn't slow down the assault. Alexander and June teleported under the crack, and King Elbaz immediately joined them. The three unleashed part of their power when they prepared their respective attacks, and the pressure accumulated in the area almost threatened to hinder the process. The three experts released so much energy that the crack expanded even before their attacks arrived. Thick sparks shot out of June, dense flares left Alexander, and scorching flames enveloped King Elbaz. The three seemed on the verge of killing each other due to that passive influence, but they were strong enough to endure the pressure. June was the first to attack. She lifted her head to stare at the crack, and the entirety of her body turned into a blinding orange spot that unleashed a chaotic mass of lightning bolts. The lightning bolts didn't have any specific form. June couldn't condense them into a single technique, but she didn't want to lower their overall power, so she simply discharged everything she had accumulated. Making that immense power stick to a single direction brought June's body close to its structural limits. But she didn't care. The crackling band-aids shattered, her injuries expanded, and holes opened on her skin as more lightning bolts came out of her. Yet, she remained still to send everything toward the crack. The explosion that followed the impact with the sky pushed almost everyone away. The Eternal Snake and the Foolery ended up on the nearby ice, and Sword Saint felt the need to perform an evasive maneuver to avoid the shockwave. Wilfred had to call upon the entirety of his strength to hold the ram in its place. His body remained defenseless before the shockwave, and vast chunks of his skin disappeared under its assault and the scorching item. Nevertheless, the ram didn't move, and Wilfred even forced his muscles to survive the assault. His figure transformed into a gory puppet made of bulging muscles and exposed flesh, but he continued to perform his task. King Elbaz had relied on a technique to survive the shockwave, while Alexander had used the immense power flowing through his body to remain in his position. King Elbaz shot a glance at Alexander once their turn arrived. The two didn't decide who had to go first, but quick calculations happened in King Elbaz's mind and made him seize the initiative. The vast and violent flames coming out of King Elbaz's body condensed in his palm as soon as he lifted his arm. The rest of the fake quasi-rank 10 power flowing through his body and items also shot upward to fuse with the golden fire. The crown melted, the robe disappeared, and familiar roars resounded from King Elbaz's figure as he put everything he had in his palm. The unstable mass of golden light accumulated in his hand quickly expanded to create a blinding spear that didn't have clear edges. The weapon appeared impossible to inspect due to the sheer heat around it. Even King Elbaz suffered while wielding it since most of his fake quasi-rank 10 power had gone inside it. Yet that didn't stop him from throwing it toward the crack. The crack had actually disappeared. June's attack had left a bright orange mark on the void that hid part of the sky. Still, King Elbaz had never lost track of that damaged spot, so his spear pierced the tainted area and reached its target easily. The higher plane went still for a second. Everything became silent. Time seemed to stop flowing when the spear landed at the center of the crack. That fake piece didn't last long. A circular and ethereal shockwave expanded from the crack, and a proper explosion soon followed it. A heat wave that seemed able to melt any material in the world expanded from the crack and engulfed more than half of the higher plane. Part of the eternal snake's ice directly vanished and failed to reappear due to the incredibly high temperatures caused by King Elba's offensive. King Elba's had performed an evasive measure to avoid the aftermath of his attack. The foolery and the eternal snake had also resorted to something similar due to the assault's danger. The targeted area of the sky now only had Alexander, Wilfred, and the immense ram left. The item endured the heat since King Elba's had predicted a similar outcome, but Wilfred's condition had significantly worsened. The smoke from his scorched flesh hid his injuries, but it was clear that he wouldn't keep that up for much longer. Alexander was in a similar condition. His skin could endure incredible attacks, but King Elba's belonged to the same amazing realm. The hybrid couldn't avoid suffering injuries. Most of Alexander's skin had disappeared during the heat wave, but his insides had remained intact. Yet, that only revealed the true nature of the techniques summoned during his preparations. Each strand of Alexander's muscles carried different colors and shook, following a unique rhythm. Experts would be able to hear countless types of cries if they listened closely. Various powers also flowed through that fabric. It seemed impossible that a single being could contain so many abilities, but Alexander went beyond that. The countless abilities summoned by Alexander took the form of ethereal strands of energy when they left his body. His muscles withered during the process, but he continued to accumulate that fuel above him. The strands of energy fused to create a multicolored vortex that condensed into an unstable black spot. The amount of power contained in that shape was simply unfathomable, but Alexander touched it to apply his superiority. The unstable spot couldn't remain still when all its different aspects improved. The item shattered and unleashed a rainbow-colored pillar toward the crack. A light that the higher plane had never witnessed illuminated the void. Countless shades painted the world and transformed the whole scenery. Still, the area targeted by Alexander remained too blinding to inspect. Alexander didn't have any power left after unleashing his attack. The light that enveloped the world carried multiple destructive abilities, and his body welcomed them while it fell into the void. Noah caught Alexander before he could leave the range of the higher plane and enveloped him with dark matter before throwing him away. Shafu materialized and ate Alexander before stepping aside. Noah let the multicolored light fall on his body. Different techniques tried to alter and affect his fabric, but nothing pierced his innate defenses. Meanwhile, his reptilian eyes darted among the various floating boulders created by the destruction of the landmass. I did create a sword that pierced the sky, Noah thought as he flew right under the crack, uncaring of the violent multicolored waves that had taken control of the area. A presence eventually materialized inside his world. Shafu had finally returned, and its low growl triggered a chain reaction that made the insides of Noah's mind quite noisy. Yes, you are right, Noah thought as he raised his bladeless arms above his head. It's time to turn me into that very sword. Noah didn't have any new techniques in store. His breakthrough had pushed every aspect of his world to the peak. Still, it didn't give birth to anything unique or innovative. He was simply a stronger version of himself in every field. Of course, an increase in strength among rank 9 existences wasn't as simple as it sounded. A breakthrough involved the deepening of some aspects of a world, if not all of them. Noah had experienced exactly that, which justified his incredible battle prowess. However, Noah's current target didn't show any notable weaknesses. He couldn't use his unique companions to counter certain structural flaws or problems. The sky contained heaven and earth's might and natures, which went beyond what Noah could understand or study. His violent thoughts pushed him in a specific direction, but they couldn't go too far in front of such a powerful opponent. The lack of specific options led Noah to resort to his only reasonable idea. Heaven and earth didn't show flaws, so he wouldn't try to exploit them. He would simply condense everything he had into a single attack. The cursed sword and the demonic sword remained inside Noah while he prepared his attack. Multicolored rays of threatening light filled his surroundings, but everything soon darkened as his influence expanded. The companions were the first to send their power forward. Shafu and the others had specific innate abilities and purposes, but they all worked together to create a single technique that could express their uniqueness. S. Dot? Snore had its wild and destructive energy. Night could sever matter belonging to depths that Noah couldn't sense, and the parasite produced the greatest corrosive influence in the world. The cursed sword fed on violence, and Noah had nothing else in his mind. The demonic sword was an expression of Noah's core, so most of his aspects fused in the energy it sent. Shafu and Duanlong didn't shine when it came to offensive prowess. They were strong individually, but their innate abilities had purposes that went beyond battles. Still, the two creatures sent their abilities forward anyway and let the ethereal blackness handle them. Shafu's power became an influence that affected the very fabric of space, while Duanlong added a suction force that could make any attack unstoppable. The rest of Noah's aspects flowed forward at that point. Potential filled his centers of power and allowed them to express a might they wouldn't usually be able to wield. Physical prowess, sharp energy, solid black matter, and destructive mental waves fused into the mess of innate abilities flowing toward Noah's arms. The process threatened to reach the structural limits of Noah's body, but he didn't stop there. Different auras shot out of Noah's figure to express the various aspects of his world. Anger, pride, greed, hunger, sharpness, creation, destruction, space, and time fused before becoming part of something that empowered all of them without affecting their innate nature. Pure ambition enveloped the area and created a dense domain. Noah didn't develop any specific technique, but the sheer expression of his world gave birth to a black world that spread its darkness into the rest of the higher plane. The multicolored currents still flowed, but their shades were impossible to recognize among that darkness. A curtain had fallen on the entire higher plane, and its source resembled a black hole due to how impenetrable it was. The attack that Noah chose was almost obvious. The entirety of the darkness inside the higher plane flowed back toward its source to fuse with the pitchback area. That domain also retreated until Noah reappeared. The immense energy unleashed before disappeared for an instant, only to reappear when Noah lowered his arms. A deafening thudding noise followed the gesture, and a massive black structure soon materialized on the sky. Most of the ice had disappeared by then, so the audience could study the full extent of Noah's attack. His swordless gesture had created a black mountain chain that spread in a straight line over more than half of the sky. The attack didn't actually create mountains. Those structures were dense but not solid. They also waved left and right. A closer inspection would put them closer to fumes than to giant boulders. Part of the ice returned due to the Eternal Snake's incredible innate ability. The process dispersed the mountains and revealed how much damage the recent offensive had inflicted on the sky. Many privileged cultivators couldn't help but open their mouths at the sight of the giant fissure that ran through the sky. The white layer had once been a smooth surface, but it now had an immense canal running through it. A canyon had appeared in something that those experts believed to be indestructible. That scene already surpassed heaven and earth's army's wildest expectations, but loud noises eventually resounded and attracted everyone's attention to a giant golden structure. King Elba's ram had survived the offensive, and a gory figure still hovered under it. Wilfred was nothing more than a bunch of muscles attached to a corpse, but he continued to throw his arms forward to push the giant item deeper into the sky. The sky had long lost its original stability. The incredible attacks that had landed on its surface didn't only hurt its structure. They had also affected its overall endurance. The ram finally managed to apply its effects due to that weakness. Its scorching head and spinning drills pierced the white layer by exploiting Wilfred's power. Cracks opened before the item, and the process continued until a sea of fissures spread all around the immense gorge. Noah had created a crack that ran for half of the sky, and the ram expanded that damage. Shattering noises filled the higher plane as fissures stretched from the main gorge and created a vast array. Half of the sky retained its smoothness, but the other half transformed into a series of shallow and deep gorges connected to a long central fissure. It seemed that a mere punch could make all of that crumble into a white rain, and Divine Demon didn't hesitate to provide that power. That was a good spectacle. Divine Demon laughed after appearing under the main fissure. I want to see it again. Divine Demon raised his hand, and blood-red light invaded the higher plane. That radiance churned and flowed to give birth to different shapes, and the audience remained speechless when the process ended. Blood-red versions of King Elba's, Noah, and the other experts involved in the previous offensive materialized around Divine Demon. He even created a copy of the ram and the eternal snake. Then, those figures summoned abilities identical to what their true versions had unleashed previously. Divine Demon obviously couldn't copy his companion's unique powers, but his energy replicated those natures as best as possible. "I did say I would tease everyone," Divine Demon declared. "Well, hurry up." The figures shot forward, and the higher plane experienced a blood-red version of the previous offensive. Massive attacks crashed on the cracked sky at the same time, and their effects expanded the damage it had already suffered. By the time the attack ended, the sky had lost any trace of smoothness. Cracks covered the entirety of its surface, and some of them stretched quite deeply into its structure. A faint gust of wind eventually fell on the sky. No one knew where that gale had come from. Too many attacks had happened to connect that event to one of them. Nevertheless, that faint gale triggered a chain reaction that involved the entire sky. A mere touch on the cracks made them separate from the main structure. When the first chunk of the white layer fell, the rest followed and filled the higher plane into a rain of white boulders. Noah almost couldn't believe the scene unfolding in his eyes. Chunks of the sky were falling from every corner of the white layer. The cage around the higher plane had finally crumbled, but something strange eventually became evident. None of the boulders fell into the void. Those white chunks left the sky only to converge toward the center of the higher plane and limit the overall space left in the world. Noah also noticed something else during that process. The spaces among the various boulders didn't open a path toward the universe. He could still see heaven and earth's whiteness behind that rain. The sky was still standing. The main team gathered at the center of the higher plane, but the boulders soon forced those who didn't join the fight against heaven and earth to move too. Emperor, Queen, and Vesuvia teleported next to the main team. It was unclear where their opponents were since the rain hid them, but no one had the time to worry about them. A giant teleport also appeared in the area, and a golden array of inscriptions came out of it. Pelio and the other experts involved with that structure reached the main team, and a series of questioning gazes fell on Noah. Noah couldn't give answers since he was as confused as his companions. It was clear that heaven and earth were up to something, but the scenery didn't offer any valuable clue. Nevertheless, the team wasn't too worried. The boulders were massive and could cover the entire higher plane, but they didn't carry any real power. They had energy flowing inside them, but their structural stability had already crumbled. A few simple attacks would shatter them. "Let's clear the area before things get worse," Noah promptly ordered, and a few experts followed his sprint. King Elba's, Divine Demon, Emperor, Sword Saint, and Supreme Thief chased after Noah before splitting to reach different areas of the rain. Their heavy influence even expanded past their bodies while they prepared their offensive, but the boulders didn't wait for them to attack. A humming noise came out of the sky behind the boulders and triggered a reaction in the entire white rain. The energy inside the various rocks became unstable, and a series of rays shot out of them to create a joint offensive. The boulders stopped being separate entities and harmonized under the effects of the white rays. They even tightened their blockage to close any potential path toward the rest of the higher plane. The energy summoned by the boulders was violent but stable. The entire array seemed on the verge of exploding, but its power flowed smoothly and started fueling a joint ability. Noah lifted his arms, but his destruction suddenly warned him about the repercussions that his attack would cause. He could dig a hole through that white array, but the event would only make the accumulated energy explode. Experts like Noah could endure the explosion, but the area didn't have only the main team anymore. The array of inscriptions had become a target, and the allies defending it probably wouldn't survive that offensive. Pelio, Cursed Reality, Great Builder, and the other experts involved with the inscriptions had kept that structure alive during the final battle, but they weren't on the sidelines anymore. The targeted area had also shrunk due to the advance of the boulder. The inscriptions would have to face heaven and earth's power directly now, and they didn't have the structural resilience to do so. Besides, Pelio and the others were almost exhausted. Noah felt almost sure that his attack would kill most of his companions. "Your attacks have been excellent." Heaven and Earth's voice resounded from behind the array of boulders, while Noah was immersed in his thoughts. "Your worlds highlighted so many flaws. We'll use what we learnt to concoct energy befitting of our being." Noah and King Elbaz exchanged a glance, and they also turned to inspect the reactions of the other inscription masters. All of them understood Heaven and Earth's plan in those seconds. The matter was so obvious that even some of the idiots realized what was happening. The main team and Noah's organization as a whole were full of rebels. Those experts opposed Heaven and Earth, but they had to resist their tempting offers to reach that point. Those laws and worlds had highlighted some flaws in Heaven and Earth's existence, and Noah's team had also managed to prove them. The experts' offensive had succeeded even against the crystal energy, which showed how the rulers had yet to achieve a stable form. That was common knowledge by then. Heaven and Earth had admitted that their crystal energy wasn't ready even during the battle. Yet, the current offensive carried the deeper intentions that had guided their actions until now. "These are the leftovers," Noah commented. "We accumulated too many inferior and weak worlds throughout the eras." Heaven and Earth replied as an ethereal version of their avatar materialized before Noah. "We didn't want to create more non-laws or multiple versions of ourselves, so we used you to cut away those meanings for us." A lesser expert would blame himself for the event, but Noah could see through Heaven and Earth. He knew that the rulers would have found a way to solve the issue even without his team. Still, his problems didn't end at that shallow taunt. The array of boulders contained all the meanings that Heaven and Earth wanted to cut away from their existence. Yet they still shared a connection with them. That attack wouldn't have been possible otherwise. A joint blow capable of using the power expressed by countless worlds would fill anyone with fear. Moreover, Heaven and Earth had made sure to stuff those boulders with crystal energy. The offensive promised to be the strongest attack the higher plane had ever witnessed, and the entirety of Noah's organization was its target. Truth be told, Noah had long since steeled his resolve. He was ready to launch his attack and condemn the entirety of his organization to survive. He wouldn't even hesitate to do so, but he had a valuable alternative. The dark world materialized at Noah's side and expanded to engulf the area encircled by the offensive. Screeching noises resounded inside it as small creatures shot through the dark matter and attached themselves to the array of boulders. Noah retracted the dark world and allowed his companions to inspect the scene. An immense pack of black worms had landed on the boulders and had started to dig through their surface to eat their fabric. "June!" Noah shouted, and June knew what he meant. Clouds quickly covered the worms while they devoured the boulders. Thunders resounded through the black gas, and giant lightning bolts soon shot out of them. Each lightning bolt was a peak rank 9 attack, and some even threatened to surpass that limit. The inscriptions and weaker experts would crumble against them, but June made sure to attract all of them. Those involved with the cursed labyrinth recognized the worms even if their life inside Noah's dark world had partially altered their bodies. Those creatures could eat Heaven and Earth's materials and imitate their lightning bolts. Noah had never found the chance to use the worms while the sky was smooth and impenetrable. However, the array of boulders didn't carry the same structural stability, so the pack could take care of it and its threatening energy without causing any worldwide explosion. As for June, the similarities with Heaven and Earth's attack allowed her to absorb the lightning bolts without suffering any damage. Actually, the worm's offensive allowed her to fix some of the injuries that filled her body. The ethereal version of Heaven and Earth's avatar inspected the dark clouds without showing any expression. The array of boulders was losing power due to the worms, and the attack appeared impossible to complete in that situation. Noah felt glad that cursed reality and the others had hidden something so valuable from Heaven and Earth's gaze. The rulers appeared speechless in front of the worms. They probably didn't expect their opponents to have that trump card. The array of boulders continued to lose power as the worms ate and expanded their domain. The number of lightning bolts leaving the clouds increased because of that, but June took care of them. Everything pointed in the direction of a prevented tragedy, but Noah didn't dare to underestimate Heaven and Earth. He remained in front of the ethereal avatar, ready to react to any unforeseen counterattack, and his companions imitated his stance. Heaven and Earth concluded their inspection of the worms quite quickly. Those creatures weren't complicated life forms, and Noah's influence didn't change that. They were annoying magical beasts born to eat the sky, but that didn't make them too dangerous. "You can't stop us," Heaven and Earth announced. Not completely. The ethereal avatar didn't move, but another humming noise came out of the sky behind the blockage anyway. The sound altered the boulder's behavior and the flow of the energy inside them. The crystal energy inside the boulders started to gather in a spot behind the ethereal figure. The worms instinctively moved toward that rich area, but painful screeches resounded as soon as they entered its range. The meanings contained by the boulders went through some changes. Heaven and Earth reassembled and enhanced specific effects so that they could counter the worms. The worms in the transformed area ran away to escape that new influence, but many died in the process. That didn't change the overall threat posed by the pack, but it opened a path from which Heaven and Earth could attack. Heaven and Earth had sacrificed part of the energy inside the array to achieve the transformation, putting Noah in front of that terrifying attack once again. The accumulation of power resumed, and the white rays also changed their position to reinforce the boulders involved in the offensive. "You won't let us use this on the entire world," Heaven and Earth exclaimed. "We'll use it on you." Heaven and Earth's speech didn't consider the weaker experts in Noah's organization at all. They knew that an attack focused on Noah would probably kill most of his organization anyway. But they didn't care. As for Noah, he immediately acknowledged that his trump card had failed. The inscriptions and his weaker companions were in danger again, but he had countermeasures in that new situation. The offensive wouldn't come from every side anymore. It would retain the same power as before, but Noah could avoid creating an explosion that would kill his companions now. Noah retreated to reach an area between the clear spot among the black clouds and the inscriptions. The experts who had proven their worth in the final battle and were still able to fight gathered around him, and a defensive line soon formed. Alexander, Wilfred, and Supreme Thief were in no condition to join that offensive. The two hybrids needed to heal for a bit, while Supreme Thief had to disperse the tainting influence gathered during his interaction with the sky. Vesuvia also remained behind since her world couldn't do much in a battle of sheer power. The same went for the experts involved with the inscriptions since they were too exhausted to join the offensive. June couldn't do much in that situation either since she had to take care of the lightning bolts. Her presence would be greatly appreciated, but the entire organization would have to face the worms if she didn't remain in her place. Sepunia had the chance to leave the inscriptions to join the main team, and Cursed Reality also sent a series of yellowish items forward to help the face-off. Meanwhile, Noah and the others summoned their power to replicate something similar to their previous attack. The Eternal Snake charged forward without bothering about preparations, and its companions didn't stop that reckless charge. The creature pierced the ethereal avatar and headbutted the boulders, but the impact only destroyed part of its head. Of course, the Eternal Snake could endure far more than that, but the boulders didn't let it launch another attack. The crystal energy flowing through those materials reached the critical point and sucked dry the materials assaulted by the worms before unleashing its power. The Eternal Snake summoned as much ice as possible, but the torrent of energy released by the boulders pierced it anyway. The violent attack flew through the void until it reached Noah's group, and the experts were ready to welcome it. Teamwork and cooperation became pointless at that point. Heaven and Earth didn't do anything special. Their offensive was a mess of weaker worlds and laws fueled by crystal energy. It had no harmony, so their opponents could fight it with sheer might. Noah and the others attacked almost simultaneously, launching incredible attacks. Their abilities had only one rule. They didn't have to clash with each other. Everything else was allowed in that situation. The impact between the two attacks unleashed a circular shockwave that expanded through the void and reached the pack of worms. Those creatures were too frail to withstand that aftermath, so they crumbled into dust as soon as pressure landed on them. The pressure wasn't even linear. The shockwave soon expanded alongside the pack, destroying its clouds and the creatures inside them. The worms had been in the open for a mere minute, but the clash turned them extinct in an instant. The worm's death would typically give the rest of the array a chance to launch another attack. However, The exposed spot had drained the other boulders to perform its offensive, so the shockwave ended up turning the entire blockage into dust. The disappearance of the clouds freed June from her task, but she didn't have the chance to join the main offensive since the two attacks had already clashed. Nevertheless, shockwaves and violent consequences of the clash expanded through the void, and the inscriptions fell on their path. June didn't hesitate to turn her figure into a mass of energy that reopened many injuries and put her in a bad state. Her technique allowed her to launch multiple precise lightning bolts that destroyed any threat flying toward her weaker companions. The clash ended rather quickly, without revealing a clear winner. The two offensives stopped each other and dispersed once their energy reserves became empty. Gales made of dust took control of the higher plane during the aftermath, but they soon fell into the void and cleared the area. The experts' mental waves also stabilized enough to make them inspect their surroundings, but gasps quickly followed that event. Noah was one of the first to regain control of his senses. A ringing noise had taken control of his ears, and white patches hindered his vision, but his consciousness worked more than fine. The scene that materialized in Noah's mind as soon as his consciousness expanded generated a series of wild emotions that could be best summarized as utter confusion. The sight of the white sky didn't surprise him, but its features almost crushed his confidence. The sky stood proudly around the higher plane, but its appearance had slightly changed. It was brighter than before, and its smooth surface radiated a purity that Noah couldn't describe. Yet, the innate pressure radiated from the sky remained its most shocking feature. The white layer had lost its quasi-rank 10 features. It was a proper rank 10 structure now. Groans, gasps, and other sounds filled the areas. Heaven and Earth's attack had left most of the main team tired, with some experts in desperate need of rest. Yet, nothing could distract Noah from what had entered his consciousness. What? Noah couldn't help but exclaim in his mind before flying forward. Noah's consciousness expanded far past its normal limits and allowed him to sense the entire higher plane. Every member of Heaven and Earth's army had disappeared. The higher plane now featured only his organization and that new sky. The emptiness of the higher plane wasn't enough to distract Noah either. He continued to fly forward until he arrived in front of the white layer. The sky didn't hide anything from him, but he still struggled to evaluate its power. Noah's instincts didn't cry in fear before the sky, but he still hesitated. He could feel the immense difference in power between him and the white layer. There was a high chance that his senses couldn't understand the type of danger it posed. Yet, as seconds passed, Noah realized that the sky wasn't only harmless. It was also motionless and silent. This fabric didn't belong to a life form or a world. That white layer felt like nothing more than an inscribed item. Is it empty? Noah wondered as he stretched his arm to touch the sky. The sensations that flowed through Noah's limb were impossible to describe. He could feel an amount of power far greater than the higher plane, and he also sensed that his mind couldn't see all of it. The meanings contained in the sky were another topic altogether. Noah recognized something vaguely familiar to what Heaven and Earth had summoned during the final battle, but his senses were mostly in the dark. His mind couldn't reach the depths touched by the white layer. What does this even mean? Noah cursed in his mind. The matter was quite confusing. Noah didn't know how a mere item could contain such deep meanings, but he eventually threw those thoughts to the back of his consciousness. His mind might simply be unable to understand the type of life form that Heaven and Earth had become. What does this even mean? King Elbaz voiced, announcing his presence near Noah. I have no idea, Noah responded while more experts left their position to approach and study the sky. Ken Dash. King Elbaz tried to ask before interrupting himself. His gaze went on Noah before moving it to the rest of his companions, but his expression only showed helplessness. Noah could understand King Elbaz's incomplete questions because similar thoughts ran through his mind. Noah's first instinct was to pierce the sky, but that urge vanished as soon as he touched it. The white layer was a proper rank 10 item. Rank 9 existences couldn't destroy it. What about Heaven and Earth? Alexander asked in a weak voice while multiple healing abilities worked on his injuries. Heaven and Earth are dead, A familiar voice resounded in the distance. The entirety of Noah's organization turned toward the source of the voice only to see a pale radiance coming out of the sky. Caesar and the other members of Heaven and Earth's army appeared in the void, but the process didn't end there. More and more patches of pale light appeared before the sky and teleported items into the world. Soon, planets, landmasses, and other types of planes filled the void and accumulated at its center. Noah couldn't believe his eyes. Some landmasses only had materials and living beings in the human ranks. Others barely met the requirements to be higher planes. There were even a few dead creatures among them, and their level spanned between the heroic and divine ranks. A sense of familiarity filled Noah, and he didn't need to think too hard to understand why. He had actually seen some of those planes before. They were the mortal lands and other landmasses that Heaven and Earth had imprisoned in their influence. Heaven and Earth are dead, Caesar repeated while stepping forward to separate himself from the rest of the army. Congratulations. Your survival marks your victory in the final battle. What exactly does that mean? Noah asked, and growls mixed with his human voice. It means exactly what I said, Caesar stated, revealing his iconic broad smile. You won. You defeated Heaven and Earth. A black line suddenly ran through Caesar while connecting two opposites of the sky. The attack unleashed all its power on the marked area, so the weaker lands nearby didn't suffer any damage. Yet the same went for Caesar. His body shattered into a white gas before reforming. You can't hurt me, Caesar happily revealed. I won't die as long as the sky stands. What about your companions? King Elbas threatened while summoning a mass of fake quasi-rank 10 energy in his right hand. They, Caesar uttered before glancing at his underlings and moving his gaze back to his opponents. They will have to decide where to stand. Heaven and Earth made an exception, but that won't happen again. How can they make an exception if they are dead? Noah wondered. You should have understood this by now? Caesar teased. You have some of the best experts when it comes to higher forms of energy. The jump to Heaven and Earth situation isn't too long. Noah and King Elbas exchanged a glance before focusing back on the sky. Everything they knew about Heaven and Earth flowed through their minds, and understanding eventually dawned upon them. Exactly, Caesar exclaimed as soon as he noticed understanding appearing on the experts' faces. Heaven and Earth are the children of a single path. The breakthrough would have always been impossible if they didn't eliminate that flaw. Noah couldn't help but look at the sky again. The sensations from before were on point. The sky was nothing more than an item, but that wouldn't be true forever. Death and rebirth, King Elbas commented. Correct, Caesar declared. The only way to cultivate as a being from two paths is to be born as one. Your efforts and Heaven and Earth's magnificence led us to this achievement. The rulers will die only to be reborn as the strongest type of rank 10 existence in the entire universe. Everything made sense now. Noah gained a complete understanding of the situation. Heaven and Earth had never planned to win. They had never even cared about the final battle. They had always worked to reach that phase. The struggles of Noah's organization had allowed Heaven and Earth to perfect their crystal energy. The severing of useless meanings had completed that procedure, pushing the rulers to their last state. Now, Heaven and Earth had the right fuel, so they only needed to be born again. The rebirth would remove any latent weakness and turn them into a new, powerful being powered only by their crystal energy. What about these lands? Noah asked. They are food for Heaven and Earth's rebirth, Caesar explained. What about us? Noah wondered. Rank 9 existences can live forever. Theoretically, Caesar pointed out, world can survive on their own, but the absence of trials and external inputs can wither them. It might take eras, but Heaven and Earth aren't in a hurry. The answer transformed inside Noah's mind. Caesar didn't explicitly say it, but Noah knew the truth. His entire organization and the lands inside the sky were nothing more than food now. Noah immediately came up with alternatives. Heaven and Earth might be indestructible in their current form, but there were other paths that could lead into the universe. His gaze went to the void as his body transformed into a sharp gust of energy that dived deep into the darkness. Space worked on multiple dimensions, so there could be paths outside heaven and earth's domain inside that blackness, but Noah soon found himself in front of a familiar wall. The journey through the void barely lasted a few seconds. Noah didn't even escape the range of his companion's senses when he found a white layer standing in front of him. Heaven and earth had pushed everything touched by their influence inside the sky, so journeying through the void could offer a potential path toward the universe. The travel wouldn't be easy, and only rank 9 existences would be able to survive it, but the rulers had considered that option. The sky was slightly different in that location, but it retained its incredible level. Noah's understanding of space also allowed him to understand that the unusual features only came from the specific spacetime array of the area. Exploring the other areas of the void became useless at that point. Noah knew that heaven and earth didn't limit themselves to a single place. The sky existed all around the higher plane and in every separate dimension. The rulers had locked any path that could lead to the universe. A feeling of defeat expanded in Noah's mind. He was lost and without ideas. His instincts and destructive thoughts were in the same situation. His organization had won, but the victory didn't arrive. Victory isn't victory, Noah thought as he recalled Alabasha's words. Everything began to make sense. The last dots finally connected and showed the big picture to Noah. Many privileged cultivators had warned him throughout his journey, but he had never understood what they meant until now. Noah couldn't blame himself. Heaven and earth had put the 10th rank in front of him. Even the best plans and preparations in the world couldn't do anything against that. Heaven and earth had practically cheated. The final battle had always been rigged. Noah's organization could have fought multiple times better, but the outcome would have been the same. The sky would have still shown its rank 10 form sooner or later. Noah could only reunite with his companions at that point. His gaze ran through them, but he only saw the same sense of defeat that had taken control of his mind. Even the arrogant eternal snake couldn't muster the strength to speak. The creature had reappeared after enduring heaven and earth's last attack, but the sight of the rank 10 sky had killed any confidence it had. The situation was honestly worse for the eternal snake. The creature was a magical beast to its core, so it felt instinctive inferiority before the new sky. Its very species made it aware of the defeat. "Don't be too hard on yourselves," Caesar announced while stepping farther away from his underlings. "You have exceeded heaven and earth's expectations. You have pushed your power farther than any other rebel. Take pride in your achievement and wither in peace." "What's your endgame?" Noah asked. "How do you fit in heaven and earth's grand scheme?" Caesar laughed and spread his arms. Crystals came out of his figure before returning under his skin. A faint trace of heaven and earth power flowed through his body, but that also disappeared quickly. "An avatar," Noah commented. "Indeed," Caesar exclaimed. "Heaven and earth will become the strongest type of rank 10 existence in the universe, and I'll be their avatar. Once they take over the paths, I'll be able to envelop the universe in my fate. I'll be infinite and eternal." "I bet heaven and earth had plans for the others too," Noah stated. "Not everyone," Caesar explained without bothering to glance at his companions. "Only a few loyal experts were aware of the big picture. And heaven and earth are asking them to decide now," Noah continued. "I guess the offer stands for my organization too." "Correct," Caesar confirmed. "You can join the sky if you wish, but not as part of heaven and earth. Your worlds aren't necessary anymore. You'll turn into partially mindless avatars, but you'll be alive." The eternal snake snorted when it heard those words, but it didn't attack. The magical beast turned to fly toward one of the best lands it could find and settled on it. The creature wouldn't join heaven and earth, but its interest in the rebellion had vanished. The event only intensified the sense of defeat in the experts' minds. Many decided to go back to the inscriptions to rest or isolate themselves. Their thoughts were messy since both options would lead to their demise. Noah glanced at the group of privileged cultivators behind Caesar. Marcella showed confidence, but her companions appeared conflicted. Decumia kept her head lowered while the weaker experts studied each other, hoping to find answers in their allies' faces. Caesar didn't specify what the privileged cultivators would become, but their expressions revealed a lot. Heaven and earth were probably ready to cast them away if they didn't choose to become mere servants. It seemed that only Marcella had received a valuable offer. "What's the matter with you?" Marcella asked when she noticed Decumia's behavior. "You knew what this goal involved." "Yes," Decumia responded while finally lifting her head. "I thought I could be happy as long as I could spread my chaos through the universe." "You can still get that chance," Marcella explained. "Hurry up before it's too late." Marcella wasn't talking about heaven and earth. She was worried that Noah and the others would vent their frustration on her companions. Decumia would die if she didn't accept the ruler's offer. "I have doubts," Decumia admitted. "We won as planned," Marcella snorted. "Divine Architect should have survived," Decumia responded. "That was part of the plan. Our opponents surpassed our expectations," Marcella declared. "That doesn't change the outcome. They have surpassed them once," Decumia whispered before turning toward her underlings. The few surviving privileged cultivators were extremely confused. Only a couple of them knew about heaven and earth's plan, but Noah's ambition had given birth to reasonable doubts and desires. The privileged cultivators didn't know what to think anymore. They had seen the true core of the journey, but the scenery hinted at its defeat. Noah almost felt like a natural ally due to his mindset, but heaven and earth had defeated him. Noah lost interest in Caesar and the privileged cultivators during that conversation. He had a complete vision of the situation, but he lacked answers. The many life forms on the new lands in the higher plane eventually attracted his attention, and he found himself inspecting them while his mind wandered. Felt nostalgic to see environments rich in life. Noah's landmass had recreated that scenery, but he knew it was artificial. Instead, the mortal lands and plains stuffed inside the sky offered a natural and harmonious scene that triggered many valuable memories. Millennia had passed since the events of the mortal lands. Noah couldn't even count them, but they felt to belong to a different life. A life where the white sky wasn't part of his problems. The living beings roaming through those lands were mostly unaware of heaven and earth's victory. Many even lacked the intellect or cultivation level to realize that a rank 10 structure stood around them. Their innocence was almost heartwarming and forced a sigh out of Noah's mouth. The sky must contain its pressure or lack it altogether, Noah thought as he brought his attention back to the sky. None of those lands would survive its presence otherwise. Noah approached the sky to touch it again. His senses didn't lie to him. He didn't have the power to pierce that material. The entirety of the rank 9 existences in the higher plane wouldn't hurt it even if they decided to work together. A faint, almost imperceptible thought eventually appeared in Noah's mind. The idea immediately vanished, but Noah didn't miss it. His gaze promptly went back to the various lands, and countless calculations happened. Maybe, Noah thought, and his power filled his figure and generated a massive slash that crashed on the sky. The attack filled all the experts in Noah's organization with hope. Their leader didn't give up. There could be a path that their inferior minds couldn't see. Yet, their despair returned once the slash vanished. Noah's attack had been stronger than before. He had strived for an even superior level of power due to the empowerment provided by his recent success. However, the sky didn't carry any trace of that event. Noah couldn't even make it shake. Caesar sighed and shook his head before retreating toward his allies. Some of Noah's companions did the same as they flew toward the new lands or inscriptions. That single attack had been the last proof they needed. Nothing and no one in the higher plane could pierce the sky. The outcome didn't demoralize Noah. His face lost any trace of emotion and revealed only coldness as he lifted his arms again to launch another attack. An even bigger slash crashed on the sky. The attack seemed to express the utter peak of the 9th rank and the best aspects of Noah's world. It ran in a straight line for more than half of the white layer. Nevertheless, the sky didn't move or shake, and the dispersion of the slash even revealed its perfectly intact surface. Noah's attack had been pointless once again, proving how his power couldn't touch that realm. Noah truly didn't care about the outcome. His arms shot upward again, and another slash fell on the sky. The attack was even bigger than before but led to the same results. "Your resolve is commendable," Caesar declared from a distance. "But you should understand when it's time to give up." Caesar's words reached Noah's ears but didn't enter his mind. Noah completely ignored the privileged cultivator as he launched an even stronger slash. His power was increasing, becoming more effective with each exchange, but the sky didn't budge. Noah pressed on even when most of his companions had left the sky to settle on the various lands. He appeared entirely captivated by his task. Only the white layer existed in his mind, and that determination pushed his power even further. King Elbaz remained near Noah during that offensive. He inspected each slash that crashed on the sky, and part of him even marveled at their increasing might. Still, the scene didn't change his opinion. Noah wasn't actually getting stronger. He wasn't accomplishing any feat, so his world didn't expand. He was simply getting better at expressing his power, but that process had clear limits, and the sky wouldn't budge even at that point. "Noah," King Elbaz called, but Noah ignored his companion. His world depleted potential as more attacks left his figure, but he didn't care. Only the sky existed in his mind. "Noah, enough," King Elbaz called again. "Caesar is right." Noah couldn't hear King Elbaz. His entire being had turned into a machine built only to launch slashes. His attacks strived toward perfection as he continued to unleash them, but the sky didn't care. Its realm was too distant for that tiny ant. "Noah!" King Elbaz eventually shouted, teleporting before Noah and unleashing a sea of golden flames that blocked the path toward the sky. However, a black slash shot out of Noah, pierced the golden sea, and landed on the sky anyway. The power that reached the white layer couldn't match the previous offensive due to the hindrance of the flames, but Noah didn't seem to care. "You'll only shorten your life like this," King Elbaz pointed out, condensing his sea into a fiery spear that he aimed at Noah. "So what?" Noah asked while another slash flew past King Elbaz and landed on the sky. "What's your great plan?" "We have materials and time," King Elbaz explained. "I can come up with something." "Don't lie to yourself," Noah snorted while launching another slash. King Elbaz felt invisible. Noah was attacking the sky, uncaring of the conversation. He didn't even want to discuss the topic, but King Elbaz didn't have valuable answers. The plan to use the new materials had multiple flaws. King Elbaz's ability couldn't make him reach the 10th rank, and most of the new planes were mortal lands. They would burn before he achieved some form of enlightenment. Still, the nature of the plan didn't make King Elbaz completely wrong. He was right about Noah, and he couldn't leave him in that state when his organization desperately needed him. "Stop," King Elbaz threatened as his spear brightened. "Or I'll stop you." Noah didn't answer. He launched another slash and gathered potential once again. In his mind, the conversation with King Elbaz had already ended. "Did you lose your mind?" King Elbaz shouted. "Do you think you can destroy a rank 10 item all by yourself? Help me then." Noah growled without halting his offensive. The growl expressed mostly coldness, but King Elbaz recognized different feelings behind all of that. Noah's anger, pride, and determination were still there. King Elbaz frowned. He had initially believed that the defeat had been too hard on Noah. Any expert could go crazy after suffering such a major blow to their confidence. The event would even be reasonable in Noah's case due to how much he had invested in the final battle. Yet, the growl revealed something different. King Elbaz couldn't consider Noah crazy anymore after hearing that order, but he couldn't explain the reason behind that determination. King Elbaz's gaze fell on the new lands as he searched for answers, and scanners even came out of his body to help him. Slashes continued to fly past him to reach the sky, but his inspection never stopped. Noah had yet to give up, and he had to understand why. Countless calculations happened in King Elbaz's mind. He performed hundreds of simulations, but all of them led nowhere. The issue wasn't in the potential power of the higher plane. He simply didn't know the limits of a rank 10 item. King Elbaz eventually glanced at the sky before focusing back on Noah. His eyes shone, but that glow quickly disappeared. Part of him understood Noah's intentions. King Elbaz couldn't call that a plan, but it was better than nothing. Another slash fell on the sky, and a loud explosion of fake quasi-rank 10 energy soon followed. King Elbaz had left his position to start a personal assault on a different area of the white layer. He didn't exchange words with Noah, but that didn't matter. He knew what he had to do. And here I thought you were really considering withering away as an option. Divine Demon laughed as he positioned himself in another area of the higher plane to start a personal assault on the sky. We are still alive, Alexander stated as he imitated his companions. No point stopping now. Don't you dare leave me behind. The foolery squealed as it joined the offensive. June limited herself to a snort, but she also approached the sky to launch her assault. Soon, more and more members of the core team reached the edges of the higher plane to summon their best attacks. The entire white layer was the target, and Noah's organization had enough experts for the task. Caesar shook his head at that scene. The sole idea that a joint assault could work against a rank 10 material was simply ludicrous. The 10th rank would lose value if it could actually lose. Nevertheless, Decumia and the privileged cultivators affected by Noah's ambition saw the situation differently. They could sense something faint building up inside the higher plane, but that force remained too weak to clear their minds. What are they trying to accomplish? Marcella wondered. The offensive had never stopped. Actually, more experts had left the array of inscriptions to join the assault on the sky. Noah didn't give orders or explanations, but a small army of rank 9 experts had gathered anyway. The defeat broke them, Caesar sighed. Their obsession has long since overcome the realm of insanity. They wouldn't have reached their current level otherwise. Yet, that incredible quality turned into a flaw now. Noah and his companions launched a relentless offensive, uncaring of their draining worlds or the injuries they suffered. Alexander, Wilfred, and other experts barely had the time to heal, but they had still jumped into the front lines to join the assault. June couldn't reset her perfect circuit, so the energy she released hurt her body. However, that didn't stop her, and the same went for all the companions in a similar situation. Caesar was right. Noah didn't explain anything or give orders. Yet, his efforts naturally unleashed ambition that carried his intentions. His influence told a story to anyone willing to hear it, and many minds decided to fall for those tempting words. The ambition didn't stop at the array of inscriptions. It enveloped the entire higher plane, seeping into the mortal lands and corpses that had occupied the world. Noah's influence forced everything to improve quickly, but it also conveyed his innate desire to strive for higher levels of power. The beings in the human ranks didn't know anything about heaven and earth, and the same went for many in the heroic ranks. Most of those life forms couldn't even see as far as the sky, and the void between them remained a deadly zone they couldn't traverse. However, even the void changed while the offensive continued. The appearance of new lands quickened the fixing of the space-time array proper of the higher plane, and a black atmosphere eventually formed. A chunk of the higher plane remained immersed in the void. After all, Noah and the others were unleashing incredible attacks that could shatter any weak space-time fabric. Nevertheless, they instinctively focused most of their destructive power on the sky, which spared the world from their might. The scene was incredible from the perspective of the weaker beings. They had teleported inside the higher plane only to appear in front of a colorful spectacle. They couldn't actually see Noah and the others, but some flares and flashes reached their atmospheres and created wonders in their worlds. The incredible scene only enhanced the effects of Noah's ambition. More and more living beings began to feel a pulling force drawing them toward the distant sky, but none of them could explain that urge. Noah didn't plan to have that effect on the world. He was merely going all out, and each attack pushed him closer to a perfect form that could express the best version of himself. S. Noah's desire to seize higher forms of power wasn't reasonable. That feeling was an unstoppable urge that had led him into the greatest battlefield the higher plane could ever create. The beings immersed in his influence were only experiencing part of that immense passion. What a reckless power, Caesar commented once the army gathered before the sky grew far more numerous. There is nothing more dangerous than blind ambition. Will heaven and earth be fine? Marcella asked. Do you think they can defeat the sky by amassing enough ants? Caesar wondered. I'm talking about their energy, Marcella pointed out. Many will exhaust themselves to death if they keep this up. Heaven and earth don't need them, Caesar explained. These rebels are nothing more than a quick meal for their awakening. It will save them the trouble of roaming the universe in search of something suitable. Marcella nodded and let go of the matter. Everything worked as long as the rebirth succeeded. As for Noah and the others, she had already lost interest in them. The assault continued, and the ambition intensified until many rank 8 existences decided to leave their homes to join Noah and the others. They understood what was at stake there, and Noah's influence convinced them that dying fighting was far better than slowly withering away. The addition of more people in the assault only reinforced the ambition inside the higher plane, and it didn't take long before many rank 7 existences joined the offensive. The sky's lack of pressure allowed even weaker experts to stand in front of it, so they found no real reason to remain behind. That trend stopped at some point. Most divine beings had joined the assault, but that seemed to be it. Many life forms in the heroic and human ranks had no connection with Noah's cause, and his tempting ambition couldn't force them to abandon the safety of their homes. Of course, those weaker beings were unaware that their fate was doomed either way. Remaining behind or consuming themselves during the assault would lead to the same conclusion. Every natural resource would eventually vanish, and even the stronger worlds would wither after entire eras spent without achievements. Time flowed without providing any change in the scenery. Years went by, but the experts involved in the offensive didn't increase. Life thrived on the lands, entire organizations appeared and fell, and legends started to spread. The presence of Noah's ambition accelerated the breakthrough of many weaker beings. Some became strong enough to leave their homes and make the journey toward the sky in search of higher forms of fuel. They all discovered that the world had an invisible force that made the journey easier and safer. Those beings didn't know why, but the very higher planes seemed to want them to reach the sky. Some of those beings managed to get in touch with experts belonging to Noah's time during their journeys. They heard stories about heaven and earth and the overall fate of the world, but they struggled to believe them. Those beings honestly weren't to blame for their lack of trust. The fact that their whole reality was nothing more than a lifeless trap was simply unacceptable. However, those thoughts changed once they managed to get a proper sight of the offensive. Needless to say, chaos spread through the higher plane. Those weaker beings returned to their homes and told what they had witnessed. Many didn't believe them, and wars happened as different ideologies clashed. Noah was unaware of those changes. His thoughts existed for the sole purpose of destroying the sky. He was perfecting himself as potential appeared and vanished. He was turning himself into a worthy weapon, but his world was much more than that, and the higher plane benefited from his improvements. The weaker beings who believed in the stories about heaven and earth gained greater benefits from Noah's ambition. They didn't realize that, but part of their minds had already accepted Noah as a leader. The innate advantage granted by Noah's ambition allowed those beings to overcome their opponents and win wars. Many organizations that shared the same mindset and purpose came to life, and even more changed when they interacted with the beings living in the golden inscriptions. New schools appeared, and newborns started to fill the lands. The natural resources diminished, but the whole world slowly unified under a single banner. Meanwhile, Noah's ambition continued to intensify. Noah didn't know that, but he had already overcome his previous achievement. He had united what remained of the higher plane under a single banner to fight heaven and earth, and the same happened during the relentless offensive. Yet, his influence had unified multiple mortal lands at that time. The scene was truly spectacular, but Caesar remained unfazed. Noah had pushed every being previously contained in heaven and earth's influence to evolve according to his ambition. The event filled Noah with potential, but he didn't notice that change. As the new organizations expanded, new experts started to join the offensive. Heroes of lands far inferior to the higher plane left their homes to complete the journey through the world and reach the sky. The army before the sky finally resumed its growth, and Noah's ambition intensified in the process. Every new expert joining the assault seemed to add power to his innate influence, and the world improved because of that. Noah's influence became so thick that the very space-time array transformed. The world was already helping the weaker experts during their journey toward the sky, but it slowly gained a new resilience as the army grew. The new resilience shrunk the areas occupied by the void and allowed the weaker experts to stand closer to the sky. The lands also became able to expand their atmosphere in that space-time array, granting the chance to creatures in the heroic and human ranks to explore more of the world. The changes didn't end there. As the years passed, the space-time array created safe areas near the sky that shielded the weaker experts from the violent energy released by superior existences. Soon, even heroic beings could join the offensive without risking death in the process. The eternal snake eventually became unable to stand that sight. It left its domain to approach the sky, and many new members of its species followed. The creature had expanded its pack during those years, but those magical beasts were now part of the joint offensive. That trend never stopped. Every newborn born in the higher plane developed an innate knowledge of the situation and understood its higher role. The magical beasts disregarded their innate aggression to push themselves toward that universal purpose. The humans and hybrids put aside their differences to learn from each other and work together. New species meant to counter the sky appeared, and their mutations soon became a common sight in the higher plane. Their birth only accelerated the overall growth of those weaker lands and partially compensated for the withering natural resources. The lands as a whole grew weaker. That process was unavoidable due to the increased number of life forms appearing in their environments. But Noah's ambition somehow delayed their death. It seemed that the very ground wanted to do its part in providing as many resources as possible. The privileged cultivators could see how Noah's ambition had long since started to overcome its structural limits. That influence didn't affect pure materials anymore. Noah had managed to turn the very higher plane on his side. The space-time array, the many new lands, and anything else inside the sky evolved in a specific direction. The world wanted to see the sky fall, and the joint offensive was its only available weapon. Enough with this, Xianxia announced when the first being in the human rank crossed the world to reach the sky and join the offensive. "What are you doing?" Marcella promptly asked when she saw Xianxia stepping forward. "The world needs my chaos," Xianxia declared before teleporting to an available spot of the joint offensive to begin her assault on the sky. "Fool," Caesar sighed. But he didn't do anything to stop his companion. It was within Xianxia's rights to pick a side. Marcella studied Caesar's uncaring face for a few seconds before moving her gaze back to the higher plane. She couldn't completely blame Xianxia. The sight was truly spectacular. Noah clearly was the best rank 9 existence in the world, but his opponent remained a rank 10 item. Xianxia's departure didn't go unnoticed, but the experts busy with the assault didn't say anything about the matter. However, her decision intensified the privileged cultivators' doubts, and some eventually decided to step forward to fight the sky. Only a few privileged cultivators had to leave before the entirety of that group joined the assault on the sky. Marcella and Caesar remained alone, but they didn't say anything. Caesar radiated pure confidence, while Marcella was utterly captivated by the scenery. Years continued to flow, but the trend never stopped. The world gave birth to life forms that evolved with a sole purpose. Noah's ambition only intensified as his army grew, and the lands soon started to change too. Heaven and earth had initially stuffed all their mortal lands and plains at the center of their cage, but they had unified into a single landmass in the following years. Yet that wasn't the end of it. As the migration toward the sky continued, the lands stretched toward the white layer to help their weaker children fulfill their purpose. The landmass transformed into a spiked mess of immense lands that offered environments right before the sky, that allowed many beings in the human ranks to join the assault without giving up on their lives, granting constant growth to the army without sacrificing the overall birth rate. The natural resources obviously suffered during that trend, and Noah's ambition soon became unable to keep up with that issue. Those lands were doomed no matter how intense his influence became. It all began with a single patch of dry land. The ground in that spot lost too much energy and transformed into powerless dust that vanished into the higher plane. That issue occurred more often until entire flourishing environments transformed into dried lands that crumbled under their own weight. Big chunks of the new world vanished, but the feeding process never stopped. Dying was worth it as long as the newborns could pursue their goals. The process continued until the central parts of the new world completely vanished, leaving behind only the spikes that had stretched toward the sky. The array of inscriptions sent power in every direction to delay that shattering, but its energy reserves also ended at some point. The giant spikes crumbled too. Nothing could stop that destruction. The world was on the verge of exhausting its natural resources, but no one in the army cared. Only the sky existed in their mind, and they wouldn't stop until it crumbled. The disappearance of natural resources would typically give birth to a bloodbath. The stronger beings would kill those under them to secure energy that could increase their survival chances. However, nothing similar happened even after the last patch of land vanished in the vastness of the higher plane. Except for Marcella and Caesar, every living being inside the sky became part of the joint assault at that point. Even the weakest rank one worm launched attacks toward the sky in an attempt to open a path toward the universe. Caesar didn't say anything, but Marcella faltered inside her mind. She started to believe that the universe had to be utterly unfair to allow such a majestic effort to fail. Something told her that Noah deserved the 10th rank more than heaven and earth. Then, something spectacular happened. Attacks fell on the sky as usual, but the latter didn't stay still. A tremor ran through its surface and released a thudding noise that spread through the entirety of the higher plane. Noah had long since stopped thinking. Thoughts barely flowed inside his mind. He was completely unaware of all the changes that had happened in the higher plane. He didn't even know how long had passed since the beginning of the assault. However, the tremor that ran through the sky worked like a switch that reactivated every function in Noah's existence. He suddenly became aware of the new state of the higher plane, and he even sensed all the new assets who had joined the assault. The rest of the army experienced similar emotions. The offensive had continued for so long that most experts had shut their minds to maximize their power output. Yet, the tremor awakened all of them. The thudding noise spread through the higher plane and forced the assault to a stop. The sky had finally moved. The world had created something that could affect a rank 10 material, and the event naturally gave birth to a wave of shock that took control of every expert. Still, countless destructive thoughts filled Noah's mind and made him aware of the next necessary step. The army couldn't stop now. He couldn't give the sky any time to breathe, so a deafening roar promptly left his mouth. The volume of the roar almost shocked Noah. He didn't expect it to be so loud, but the new space-time array transformed it and made it safe to hear even for the weaker creatures in the army. The roar carried different meanings. Some saw it as a simple order. Others experienced a complete awakening of their powers under its might. The event was even more shocking for the beings that had never heard Noah's voice. They felt as if their very cores had finally found their true home. Nevertheless, no matter what effects the roar had, every member of the army resumed the assault with a newfound rhythm. The offensive found instinctive coordination under Noah's order, and that wasn't the end of it. The assault had been almost robotic until now. Every expert in the army simply launched their best techniques before gathering power and launching more attacks. No real emotion filled those abilities. Only Noah's ambition found its place there since it slowly enhanced everything. However, that changed after Noah roared. Pure and selfless fury seeped into the worldwide offensive, and countless cries even started to resound among the entire army. More! Noah couldn't help but roar again. Noah's destruction fused with his anger and the other violent aspects of his world before seeping into his voice. The feelings conveyed by the roar became an infective influence that took over his companions and pushed them toward higher forms of power. A few exchanges had to start and end before a second tremor ran through the sky. That miraculous event happened again, but no one stopped at that time. Noah only roared again to imbue the army with more fury. Caesar was speechless, but his confidence still held strong. Noah had made the entire higher plane surpass his expectations, but a mere tremor didn't mean anything, especially now that the army couldn't grow more numerous. Yet, the lack of natural resources didn't stop the army from growing stronger. The entire world helped Noah spread his ambition and fury, intensifying their effects and giving birth to natural power-ups. The process continued until every exchange gave birth to new power-ups. The army improved after each attack, and the trembling sky soon became a common sight. Amazing! Marcella couldn't help but comment once the sky forgot about its motionless version, but the surprises had just begun. A shattering noise eventually resounded through the higher plane. The assault didn't stop to inspect the event, but Noah saw it clearly. A tiny dent had appeared in an area of the sky above him. Another roar left Noah's mouth. His cry explained the event to the whole army, which added fury to the overall assault. Soon, more dents appeared on the sky, and a proper crack formed at some point. "This can't be real," Caesar muttered as his smile finally vanished. S? Dot? Of course, the offensive was far outside Caesar's grasp. He couldn't affect it at all. He could only watch as more and more cracks appeared on something supposed to become the best type of rank 10 existence in the universe. Losses inevitably happened during the offensive. Noah's influence was empowering everyone, but his power was no replacement for the natural resources. Many creatures in the human ranks attacked until their whole bodies dissolved into clouds that disappeared into the higher plane. The beings in the heroic ranks didn't escape that fate, and the same went for the divine experts. Noah's core team wasn't an exception. Wilfred had suffered significant injuries during the fight against heaven and earth, and the worldwide assault didn't give him any chance to heal. Still, he never stopped attacking, and he even managed to launch his best technique yet while his body and world crumbled into dust. Vesuvia's world had never been battle-oriented, and the scenery in her vision already depicted the essence of her existence. She launched a few more attacks, but she eventually wore a smile and let herself disappear. Similar scenes happened everywhere in the army. Experts and creatures of various levels died and disappeared while putting everything they had into some last attacks. Those deaths didn't weaken the overall assault. Noah's ambition was always there to bring more power to each attack, so the shattering of the destruction of the sky continued. The first deep fissures appeared, and they expanded while experts continued to sacrifice themselves for that higher goal. The whole world had achieved inhumane selflessness, and Caesar could only remain speechless in front of that scene. Eventually, a hole that connected the insides of the higher plane to the universe formed, but the army didn't find any satisfaction in that achievement. The worldwide assault continued, and more of those channels formed inside the sky. Unstable properties took over the entire white layer. Its structural stability vanished, leaving only its sheer power in charge of keeping it together. Still, the army overcame that issue too, and giant holes soon opened inside the sky. The path toward the universe was finally in sight, but the assault didn't stop. Noah wouldn't let it end there. Massive cracks expanded from the deep holes and connected to each other to create proper canyons. The smooth state of the sky became a distant memory, and everything ended when the first shard finally fell. Noah halted his offensive, and the rest of the army instinctively imitated him. A tiny shard left the sky and fell toward the center of the higher plane, but more followed. In the end, the entire structure fell apart and released massive boulders. Many experts and creatures in the army lacked the power to avoid the boulders. Those beings ended up squashed under their weight, and the same happened to the new spacetime array. The void took over the higher plane as the entire sky fell to converge at its center. The white layer finally abandoned the position it had occupied for many eras and transformed into lifeless lands that gave birth to a new landmass. Many boulders didn't have the chance to fuse into a single plane and vanished into the void, but a new home formed anyway. The army saw the birth of a new landmass free from heaven and earth's oppressive influence. The new landmass didn't have plants or life forms, but it stood in the middle of the universe without cages. It was a home that could thrive without worrying about the threatening sky standing above it. The scene generated tears among the army, but Noah and the major experts didn't have time for that. Their attention was on an ethereal crystal that had remained behind while the rest of the sky had fallen. All of them could sense pure rank 10 energy coming out of the item, and cold smiles inevitably appeared on their faces. The ethereal crystal was clearly some type of core that heaven and earth had nurtured. It even carried resemblances with the energy they had tried to concoct during the final battle, but the major experts in the army recognized it for what it was. Magical beasts had bodies, and hybrids and cultivators had worlds. Every life form that walked on the journey toward power eventually developed cores, and the shattering of the sky had revealed heaven and earth's one. Nevertheless, unlike worlds and other types of centers of power, heaven and earth's core didn't carry any innate influence. The rulers had been technically dead since they had strived for a complete rebirth, so their existence contained nothing more than energy and knowledge. There was no other way to put it. The fall of the sky had allowed the appearance of a rank 10 resource ready for the taking. Almost everyone looking at it realized that breakthroughs would be possible if they absorbed its contents. Yet only a few experts could join that hunt. Noah could sense the many deaths that his army had experienced. Lifelong friends had died, and the time to mourn them and drink in their honor would come. But he had something else to do now, and he wasn't alone. King Elba's eyes lit up at the sight of the ethereal item. A rank 10 material full of energy and knowledge was within his range, and his very being was begging him to seize it. Supreme Thief was no different. He was born for that moment. He had founded his world on that task, and he could finally show that he was the best at it. The rest of Noah's main team experienced similar reactions, but they weren't the only ones. Many privileged cultivators had survived the assault and felt deep ownership toward heaven and earth's core. After all, they had served for far too long. Caesar and Marcella were in the same situation. Their confidence had crumbled, but the existence of a rank 10 core could fix that issue. They only had to seize that incredible item. No one dared to move. The experts interested in the item knew that a mere gesture could give birth to a bloodbath, and no one wanted to fall in the first wave of attacks. Many gazes fell on Noah, King Elbas, and their companions. Those experts had caused the fall of the sky, so everyone preferred for them to kill each other. The weaker existences wouldn't have a chance otherwise. "The time has come," Noah announced. "We knew it would have been like this," King Elbas stated. "Weaklings should retreat now if they don't want to die in the aftermath," Supreme Thief exclaimed. "Why don't you start by stepping away?" Divine Demon teased. "I will never retreat in front of food," the pig squealed. "Oh my!" Divine Demon laughed. "Everyone wants to be a demon now." Everyone fell silent at that point. The experts set on seizing the ethereal crystal prepared their energy for the imminent clash. Tension spread in the area and shattered the few leftovers of the spacetime array. The hunt was about to start. The tension became too heavy for the weaker experts. The privileged cultivators were the first to shoot forward. The group didn't exchange words, but silent teamwork formed. They would work together as long as the ethereal crystal fell in their hands. However, Alexander's gory figure materialized on their path and forced them to halt their sprint. The privileged cultivators didn't know what he wanted, especially in that condition, but he didn't hesitate to explain his stance. "Don't even think about it," Alexander announced before interrupting his line to cough some blood. "There is only one being worthy of that resource." Meanwhile, the other experts involved in the hunt also shot forward, and Noah soon fell into the lead. His power had reached unfathomable heights during the offensive, and his incredible speed proved that. Marcella managed to gain some ground since her condition was almost perfect, but an expert materialized on her path and forced her to stop. She remained speechless at the sight of her old companion, but she also understood her. "We don't deserve it," Xianxia exclaimed. "We'll see about that," Marcella snorted. "Marcella, heaven and earth lost," Xianxia pointed out. "Seizing that core would only prolong that failure." "I can do better than them," Marcella shouted. "Yes, you can," Xianxia agreed. "You can now that our enemies freed us." Marcella had started to summon her energy, but that fuel dispersed. Helplessness filled her entire being as her gaze fell on the hunt. Every inch of her body wished to be part of the assault, but she knew she had missed her chance. Noah flew undisturbed until a series of lightning bolts gathered before him and generated June's figure. Her condition was awful. Countless injuries filled her world and body, but her eyes shone with pure battle intent. June didn't need to say anything. Noah understood her intentions perfectly. Lightning bolts came out of her perfect circuit and added injuries to her body, but all that power suddenly vanished. "Fight me!" June shouted when Noah used that chance to surpass her. "We'll have plenty of time for that," Noah whispered while pressing forward. But it didn't take long for an azure figure to appear at his side. "Do you really think you can beat me in a stealing challenge?" Supreme Thief asked while flying side by side with Noah. Noah was ready to attack, but a blood-red radiance suddenly fell on the area and forced Supreme Thief to slow down. Noah used that chance to accelerate even further, but he didn't miss how Divine Demon materialized above Supreme Thief and sat on his head. "What are you doing?" Supreme Thief shouted. "How is this worthy of a demon? It would be unbecoming to steal from my heir," Divine Demon explained. "Besides, I have no interest in that item. You are the same, am I right?" Sword Saint teleported next to Divine Demon and pointed a sharp mass of silver energy at Supreme Thief's throat. Blades also appeared in the area and made Supreme Thief's escape impossible. "He is so fast," Sword Saint sighed while keeping his attention on Noah. "His blade is faster than mine. We are just letting him go ahead." Divine Demon laughed while materializing 3 cups of wine that floated toward the experts. "Indeed," Sword Saint whispered while grabbing his cup. "The path is still long. We'll catch up with him." Supreme Thief wanted to struggle, but he eventually settled for the wine. He could probably break free of the hindrances, but Noah had already gotten too far for him. Noah flew freely, using everything in his world to push himself closer to the ethereal crystal. But he had to stop when a sea of golden flames exploded in front of him. "Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this moment?" King Elba's voice came out of the flames as the sea condensed to form his flaring quasi-rank 10 body. "Don't die," Noah warned as he raised both arms. "I was about to say that," King Elba scoffed while conjuring a fiery spear that sucked him dry of all his fake quasi-rank 10 power. A golden torrent of energy and an immense slash clashed among the void. The impact surpassed anything witnessed during the worldwide assault. There seemed to be 2 quasi-rank 10 beings fighting each other in that corner of the universe, and the dispersion of the chaos didn't reveal a clear winner. King Elbaz and Noah reappeared in their respective positions once their attacks dispersed. The lack of injuries hinted at a draw, but a black mark eventually materialized at the center of King Elbaz's chest and threatened to infect his flames. King Elbaz quickly cut away the infected flames, but Noah used that chance to surpass him. Still, King Elbaz set his world on fire again to achieve the fake quasi-rank 10 state and pointed his arm at the flying Noah. "Our battle is far from over," King Elbaz shouted as flames gathered in his palm to give birth to the spear, but he suddenly lost control of that massive energy. The spear crumbled into a series of flames that flowed toward a distant spot on King Elbaz's left. The expert turned only to see a fuming figure charging at him while munching the golden fire. "Xavier!" The foolery shouted while absorbing all the fake quasi-rank 10 flames and crashing on his companion. "What are you doing, you stupid pig?" King Elbaz complained and tried to summon his technique again, but the foolery ate any energy that tried to go beyond the 9th rank. "Didn't you want to get the crystal?" King Elbaz continued while failing to push away the foolery. "But I would become too strong for you if I got it," the foolery explained before licking King Elbaz's head. "And I don't want you to get too strong either. I wouldn't be able to tease you otherwise." Noah ignored the funny events happening behind him as he pressed forward. He was almost there. He could already feel the ethereal crystal in his grasp, but a last opponent managed to appear on his path. "That doesn't belong to you," Caesar shouted. "I've seen it in my fate. I'll expand until the entire universe falls under my power." "Your fate is already broken," Noah coldly remarked before transforming into a piercing slash that flew right through Caesar. Caesar couldn't understand what had happened. Noah had been too fast for his senses. Yet, he soon noticed that a hole had appeared on his torso. Its edges even expanded, and nothing in Caesar's power seemed able to stop it. Caesar turned in time to see Noah materializing next to the crystal and throwing it into his mouth. Some curiosity appeared in Caesar's mind at that point, but it was already too late for him. The hole continued to expand until his whole body disappeared and his consciousness turned dark. Immense knowledge accumulated for many eras, an unfathomable amount of energy, and countless meanings that never had the chance to be reborn flowed through Noah's world. Everything felt too much for a rank 9 mind, but the ethereal blackness potential helped and allowed Noah to go through that seemingly unlimited stream of information. Noah could see countless opportunities unfolding before his closed eyes. The ethereal crystal was heaven and earth's core. If he wanted, he could complete their path and become a personal version of the rulers. The crystal offered far more than that. The countless meanings that heaven and earth would have wielded after their rebirth were for Noah to seize. He could pick anything he wanted freely and alter his path according to his decisions. That abundance of resources and meanings tempted Noah's greedy and hungry mind, but his pride put an end to any dangerous and possibly deadly thought. Noah had defeated heaven and earth. He knew that his path had surpassed what the rulers had tried to achieve. Everything shattered. Noah's mind worked at full speed as it split and analyzed any meaning that tried to taint his world. He could use aspects of those unborn laws to deepen his existence, but the rest was useless in its current form. The useless parts crumbled into pure energy that fused with Noah's centers of power and enhanced their structure. His world overviewed the entire process, and it soon realized that Noah's current form carried unbreakable limits. He had to change to achieve a complete breakthrough. Noah was no stranger to deep modifications, especially when it came to his centers of power. His body, mind, dantian, and black hole exploded into a gory domain that didn't let any fabric escape, and only the ethereal blackness remained at the center of that structure. The process didn't end there. Night, Snore, and every other companion contained in Noah's world exploded without losing their consciousness or life. Everything remained alive among the gory and dark domain as Noah delved deep into himself to choose what he would become. Making his mind about a form wasn't an issue. Noah had always known what he was. The dream in the academy had come true. He only needed to perform one last step to complete that vision. Potential beyond the 9th rank left the ethereal blackness and filled every corner of the gory domain. That superior fuel fused with the materials and mental waves in the area before pulling everything back to its center. The domain condensed into a pitch-black, uneven form that shook and transformed while its insides solidified. Soon a sharp tip became clear, and the rest of its structure followed. 2 sharp edges and a scaled body materialized above the tip. The void already started to bend due to the pressure generated by that new presence. But the transformation continued. The blade eventually completely condensed, and its edge started to take form. A fiendish face materialized and turned into a guard that radiated a threatening pressure. The sole sight of that item seemed able to kill and destroy worlds, but the transformation wasn't over yet. A partially ethereal handle grew from the guard and wavered left and right as it merged and came out of the void. That item barely seemed real, but the power it radiated solved any doubt about its existence. The whole sword still shook and underwent some changes as its entire structure stabilized. Yet, when the process ended, a familiar ambition expanded from its fabric and enveloped the void in its empowering properties. The army couldn't avoid the expansion of the ambition, but no expert dared to move in that situation. Moreover, when that energy touched them, their injuries completely healed, and their worlds regained their peak power. A black substance soon emerged from the sword and enveloped it in its dense waves. The blackness recreated Noah's figure, and time itself seemed to stop when he opened his reptilian eyes. Noah had his eyes pointed at the army, but his attention was elsewhere. He could see his many friends, but something far deeper claimed most of his interest. The immense darkness of the universe lost its seemingly empty form and took life. Noah became able to see strands of greater and deeper meanings flowing through the blackness and converging toward distant areas. The space-time fabric of the void also began to make sense. Noah only needed to focus on a spot to bend the laws that ruled that area and change them according to his will. Noah felt almighty. He could sense that he had reached the very peak of a journey, but his superiority also made him aware of something deeper and more powerful hidden everywhere around him. The void had something that Noah couldn't inspect or recognize. The waves of meanings also reached depths his mind couldn't fully comprehend. The universe carried secrets he wasn't equipped to study, and the pull of unfathomably powerful beings even landed on his senses. Those secrets could make many experts experience a sense of loss, but Noah only smiled in excitement. He could finally sense how immense the path above the cultivation journey was, and he rejoiced at that sight. I can become far stronger, Noah thought. The 10th rank is only the beginning. S? S? Dot. The powerful beings that Noah's senses uncovered felt right behind him, even if they were incredibly distant. He only had to turn to study them, but he held himself back. Noah knew that he would never look back once he set his gaze on the universe, but he still had a few matters to settle. His organization was right below him, staring in awe at the birth of a rank 10 existence and waiting for his next move. A few words couldn't explain what Noah felt, and spending valuable time with his companions was simply impossible in that situation. He was barely holding himself back from flying toward the depths of the universe. That resolve couldn't last long, but he had something to do before his inevitable departure. The scenery before Noah's eyes contained his dearest memories and much more, but it lacked many of the experts who had helped him throughout his journey. Noah knew that his power had led the world to its current state, but he couldn't have accomplished so much on his own. He was alone at the peak, but he had gotten there with his entire organization. Memories about Lily, William, Ivor, and much more flowed through Noah's mind until he eventually felt able to hear the time dragon's last words. He had seized the ultimate reward, but each member of his army deserved something. Noah stabbed a hand inside his mind before pulling out a pitch-black strand of ethereal energy. He inspected the item for a few seconds, but he eventually shattered it and let its dust fall on part of the army. To the magical beasts, Noah announced, "I grant the spark of my ambition. May you never see your species as a limit." The dust fused with every magical beast in the army. Those creatures could refuse it, but even the stubborn eternal snake decided to accept it. Those beings' eyes immediately shone after the process, and changes happened to their very species. Noah stabbed his mind again to take out another strand of ethereal energy, and a few lines followed when he shattered it. "To the cultivators, I grant my greed. May you never settle for lower forms of power." The cultivators grew restless when they absorbed the dust, but Noah's presence kept them in line. Yet, broad smiles appeared on their faces, especially when they looked at the universe. The countless opportunities hidden among that blackness almost became too tempting for them. To the hybrids, Noah continued after shattering another strand of ethereal energy. "I grant my pride. May you never feel inferior to anyone." The hybrids couldn't help but voice loud cries when the dust fused with their existence. The gesture tried to apply heavy pressure on the area, but Noah's presence prevented all of that. The speech seemed to end there. Noah even lowered his arm, but his close friends could see that he wasn't done yet. He soon showed his left hand, but his eyes remained still. "And to my lover," Noah shouted, "I offer my hand for her to hold during an endless journey." A loud snort resounded among the army, but many gazes already happened to be on its source. June appeared beyond pissed, but her expression melted into a challenging smirk while she kept looking at Noah. June transformed into a lightning bolt that made her reach Noah in an instant. When she materialized, she stared at the lifted hand for a few seconds before heaving a sigh and finally taking it. "This is just the beginning," June warned. "I'm betting on that." Noah smirked before giving one last look at his companions. He wanted to say so much, but the tempting forces became too strong for him to hold back. Noah finally turned, and stars shone in his reptilian eyes. He could see the traces left by incredible beings among the blackness of the universe. He couldn't even fathom how strong those existences had to be to give birth to something so bright and lasting, but he had every intention to find out. June didn't even need to look at Noah, but their legs moved at the same time as they stepped upward and walked across the blackness. It seemed that they were climbing a staircase leading toward the depths of the universe, and their figures soon disappeared under the happy gazes of their companions. The end.